as well. Before we bring the jury in, just a couple of housekeeping matters. The first is that I realized that I skipped number 8 in terms of the juror questions. And so, just so that the record is clear, that's not an indication that that question is lost or that question form is lost. I just skipped a number in numbering the question forms. I went from 7 to 9. So, there's a motion filed by the media petitioners, and I don't know whether the parties have received it or not, but it is requesting access to all non-graphic image exhibits that have been admitted into evidence and displayed in open court, whose contents are not visible to the public outside courtroom 201. And as far as I can tell, it refers to the diagrams that have been admitted, which are not visible on the camera, on the closed-circuit TV camera. So I think it's a fair request, but I wanted to run it by counsel first. What I would be inclined to do is to simply scan those and provide them to the media through our public relations representative, Mr. McConnell. But I wanted to run it by the parties first to see if the parties had any position on that. I don't know whether you had a chance to review the motion yet or not. Mr. Orman, do the people have a position on that? Yes. Okay. Does the defense have any position on that? Yes. And for the record, it's exhibits 1129, 1145, 1147, 1154, 1167, and 1168. And they're all diagrams. Is that correct, Ms. Gerlings? Yeah, I think they're all diagrams. If they're not, I'll let you folks know. But if they are, I don't have any concerns about providing them, scanned copies of them to the media petitioners. Mr. King?
And I thought it was wider and so and the court is described. So we have until tomorrow morning to really read it.
That's fine. And to the extent that it's wider in scope than that, I'm not inclined to provide anything beyond that. I think it's fair to ask for exhibits that have been admitted that are not clearly visible on camera. But I think beyond that, for example, to the extent that it seeks exhibits that were used in opening statements, those are not admitted yet, and I am not inclined to provide those.
And that was where my question came from, because it appeared in the photographs that were attached that it was the opening statement exhibits that were being shown. It was during Mr. Brockler's opening statement, if I recall correctly, and there were some of his PowerPoint slides that were you could see on the screen but couldn't read them.
That may be, but the motion itself, the title is, it's a motion for access to non-graphic image exhibits that have been admitted into evidence and displayed in open court. So if that's the request, I think it's a fair request, and I don't have any concerns over it. But if you still want until tomorrow morning to think about it, I will allow that.
Yes, please.
Okay, that request is granted. Just a couple of other things. I know there have been quite a few objections to questions related to injuries. I have overruled most of them because I think that the extent, character, and nature of the injuries is relevant. I think that's probative of the injuries that were suffered by the named victims, allegedly suffered by the named victims as a result of the shooting that took place. And so I think that the people are entitled to present evidence of the character, the nature, and the extent of the injuries suffered. That includes if someone had to have surgery. That includes if somebody needed to have a recovery period. Of course, it has to be within reason. I mean, it can't go too far beyond that. And I think I've been pretty good about making sure that it doesn't go beyond that. And I don't think that the people have attempted to go too far beyond that. I think they've introduced evidence in terms of wounds and injuries and surgeries and medical treatment that was necessary as a result of those injuries. And so that's why I have overruled those objections. When Mr. Nolan was testifying, there was an objection during one of the juror questions by Mr. King related to an inference that he drew from his observations. And the witness had made that statement, I think in response to the previous question from the jury. There was no objection at that point. But then there was an objection when he mentioned it again the second time, again in response to questions from the jury. And at that point, all I said was, well, the witness has answered the question. Let me now clarify the record. I think it is a reasonable inference for an observer to draw, given all the circumstances present and given all the circumstances that he testified about. I think it's reasonable for him to make that inference. I think it may well be the most reasonable inference for somebody to make, given what he said and given the observations he made, which he testified about, and in addition demonstrated here in court. We're talking about someone who observed that an individual came into a dark theater, and he testified that the individual was shooting people who were sitting in the theater while in the dark, and that he himself was hit during the shooting a couple of times, and he was able to see the shooter at one point. And what he observed was that the shooter had what appeared to be a rifle in his hands, and that he appeared to be looking for more victims. And then he demonstrated what he meant by that. He demonstrated what observations he made. I think that given all the circumstances and observations, that's a reasonable inference. And so I don't need to take any further action in terms of the testimony because he answered the question anyway. And I didn't rule one way or another on the objection. But I wanted to make that record clear. At the bench, I did agree with Mr. King that part of the second question from the jury with respect to that witness should be modified. And I think that question included something like whether the witness thought that the defendant was trying to maximize the number of victims. And there was something about the word maximize, or the term maximize the number of victims that bothered me. And so I modified the question. I took that part of the question out. And I think there's a difference between allowing somebody to say whether the shooter was trying to maximize the number of victims versus allowing somebody to say whether he thought, based on his observations, that the shooter was trying to find more victims. And so I think the latter is fine. The former, I think an argument can be made that calls for speculation. And so that's why I ended up modifying the question. So I wanted to explain that to you. Okay? All right. Are you ready for the jury, Ms. Nelson?
Your Honor, I do have two brief matters.
Yes.
The first pertains to the post that the court made with respect to victims about the nature and extent of their injuries and subsequent medical treatment. And before over the lunch hour, the defense reached the conclusion that we feel it's necessary to make a formal oral motion of limine to exclude testimony about subsequent medical procedures and care that the victims. Detailed and lengthy testimony about the nature and extent of their injuries. We understand that brief testimony about this may be relevant to the attempted murder counts. Serious bodily injury, as the court knows, is not an element of attempted murder. Descriptions of their subsequent medical treatment and so forth is therefore not relevant to the charges in this case and is not relevant to any stage issue at any stage of the proceeding. Any minor probative, our position is that any minor probative value that this evidence may have is outweighed by the danger of unfair trial. Anything else? For 3 as well as Mr. Holmes' right. Under the 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendments. Find any authority over the 1 hour from Colorado in support of this argument. However, distinction between the nature of the injuries, ongoing treatment, and condition of State versus Hatch at 425 Northwest 2nd, 27, and the pin site, the portion of the case in which this is pages 30 to 32, and that's it.
Okay, thank you. I haven't read that case yet. Do the people want to respond?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, first of all, the prosecution would contest that it's not an issue that we still have to prove that there are 140 counts of attempted murder in this case. There's no stipulation in place. We are still responsible for proving each and every element of this case beyond a reasonable doubt to this jury, which we spent extensive time for 3 months explaining to all of these jurors during individual voir dire. Additionally, Your Honor, the people do have authority for the court. People v. Medina, which is 51 P. 3rd 1006, Colorado appellate case from 2001, which basically says not only are, descriptions of injuries admissible in cases like this, but also photographs of those injuries. Further, Hinton, and that's Hinton v. People, which is 458 P. 2nd 611, and that's a Colorado Supreme Court case from 1969. And also Martinez v. People, 235 P. 2nd 810, which is a Colorado Supreme Court case from 1951. And I also have additional authority from some federal district court cases, Alabama and North Carolina, which the court probably doesn't want at this time, but I have that as well if the court would be interested.
Sure, why don't you give them to me?
Thank you. It's James v. Culliver, that's Culliver. That's a 2014 United States District Court case from the United States District of the Northern District of Alabama, 2014. And then Scroggin, which is Scroggin v. State, which is 529 South 2nd, 1025, which is an Alabama criminal appellate court case from 1988. And then also State v. Siriana, which is Syriani, 428 Southeast 2nd, 118, which is a North Carolina case from 1993. And I have an outline of those cases if the court would like a copy. Thank you, Your Honor.
What's the site for the James case?
I have a Lexis citation, Your Honor, for that, which is 139696, since it's such a recent case. And I can provide the court with a Westlaw site tomorrow, Your Honor, on that, or perhaps on a break.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on just a second. It sounds to me like there is no disagreement that evidence related to the nature, the character, and extent of the injuries is admissible, and the only question is how far that goes. The defense, I think, is arguing that some testimony related to that brief testimony is admissible, but if you go too far, then the prejudicial effect of that evidence can outweigh the probative value. I have been making rulings based on the understanding that the probative value of the evidence was not substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice. And so what Ms. Nelson specifically was arguing is that evidence related to current condition and things to that effect, whether some was a current. What else did you say in addition to current condition?
Subsequent medical treatment as well, Your Honor.
Subsequent medical treatment. Those two items that goes too far or goes beyond what is allowed by law.
And Your Honor, I would say that the defendant is alleged to be the proximate cause of all of those injuries. There's no intervening causes whatsoever. And I frankly think it's offensive that if people are paralyzed as a result of their injuries, that they need constant daily care up until this point. And I think that the people should be able to discuss the extent of those injuries to the jury. This is a case where we've charged extreme indifference attempted murder, and I think there were many instances because of subsequent surgeries where those victims were still in danger of dying. And I think it's appropriate. And, if those were the facts with just one attempted murder victim, certainly the court would permit, that evidence. And, I think the people will try to be reasonable and prudent regarding the evidence we present. But it's what the court said. When you have a crime of this magnitude, there's going to be information that's prejudicial to the defendant's case, but it's not unfairly prejudicial.
And many of the counts are attempted murder after deliberation and with intent. In other words, that the defendant attempted to commit the crime of first-degree murder after deliberation and with intent to cause the death of another person. That's what that crime alleges, and that crime is charged with respect to numerous victims in this case. And so, again, I think the extent of the injuries and the nature and character of the injuries doesn't just go to the result of the alleged shooting, but it goes to elements of the offenses charged. And I don't think it's fair to say, well, you can ask the person what they felt in the moment or what they observed in the moment of the shooting. I think that the extent of the injury encompasses what was necessary in terms of medical intervention to address that injury. I think that goes directly to the extent of the injury. It's one thing to say, well, I looked at my arm and my arm had appeared to have blood on it, and blood was coming out of my arm. It's another thing to say, I looked at my arm and it had blood on it, and then I was taken to the hospital, and it turned out that I had a broken bone and I had to have surgery. In fact, I had to have 5 surgeries, and they had to insert a rod in there, a plate first, and then after they took out the plate, and then they inserted a rod after that. And even now, I have limited mobility in my arm, or even now I still have to do physical therapy. That all goes to the extent of the injury, and that's why I have allowed the questions that I have allowed, even if there have been some objections. As Ms. Tisch-McGuire said, though, the people have to be prudent and careful in how they proceed so that they don't go too far. And what the law worries about is that you are presenting evidence to get the jury's sympathy as opposed to for a proper purpose, and that you are that the evidence, even if that's not your intent, will be so prejudicial that whatever probative value the evidence has will be substantially outweighed by that danger of unfair prejudice. And so far, I haven't seen that with respect to any of the questions that have been asked that I have overruled objections on. But the people have to be careful how they proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Nelson, you said you had 2 things. What's the second thing?
The second is an oral motion in limine to preclude going forward questions. We've seen this now several times posed to victims concerning their military service and experience and how that relates to their ability to recognize the sounds of gunfire and the types of weapons that were fired in the theater. Your Honor, at this point, it's been established that firearms were fired in the theater that night. Several witnesses have described this in detail, and again, there's no dispute about whether firearms were discharged in the theater or which firearms were discharged in the theater. At this point, the probative value of continuing to ask victims about this is substantially outweighed by the danger of unfair prejudice and is also cumulative. And our concern is that it's improperly bolstering the character and credibility of the witnesses and as an attempt to be ingratiating in some respect to the jury. And again, I would say Colorado Rule of Evidence 401, 403, Mr. Holmes' rights to due process, his right to a fair trial and reliable sentencing proceeding, as well as the 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution, Colorado Constitution, Article 2, Sections 16, 20, 23, and 25.
Any response?
I don't know what it means that they're not disputing anything. If they don't want to dispute, they can plead guilty. Otherwise, everything is in dispute, and we've got to plead everything. This thing that they're not disputing everything, I've never heard of a case discussing this. I've never heard of a legal doctrine in jurisprudence that ever I've read since law school that talks about this. We have to prove our case. And we have to prove our case the way we think it is appropriate, not the way the defendant's attorneys think is appropriate. So I don't even know what that means. But, Your Honor, first of all, it's proper lay opinion to talk about the types of gunshots you hear. And the background of a witness is an essential fact for the jury to have in determining credibility. I'm sure the defendant would like it if we put up witnesses and just said, tell us what you saw, where the jury would have no idea what the witness's background is, or what their education is, or what their job is. We've heard objections to what their job is. But I would ask the court to consider the instruction that we give jurors on credibility. What the jurors are supposed to consider on credibility, to consider a witness's knowledge, motive, state of mind, demeanor, manner while on the stand, means of knowledge, ability to observe, and so forth. The background of a witness, what their job is, how old they are, what their education is, where they're from, all of this should go into the juror's determination of credibility. If they're in the military, that is, or formerly in the military, if they're a police officer, formerly a police officer, if they've heard guns go off before and know what it sounds like, that's all something jurors should be able to take into consideration. I do have a few cases that I would like to cite to the court on this point. There's a Colorado case that is not exactly on point, and it's really old, Your Honor. I'm almost embarrassed citing this, but it's what I could find in Colorado. It's from 1903. But we were still the state of Colorado back then. It's not a territorial case. United Oil versus Miller, 73 Pacific, not second or third, Pacific, 627, Court of Appeals, 1903. I would also cite to the court some out-of-state cases. One is McDaniel versus the Commonwealth, 415 Southwest 3rd, 643, and the pinpoint site is 654, and that's from Kentucky, 2013. That's actually about a physician, Your Honor. And in that case, the criminal defendant argued that because the physician was testifying as a lay witness, the prosecution should not have been allowed to ask the physician about his qualifications. And rejecting that argument, the Kentucky Supreme Court said, quote, appellant does not cite any cases holding that a lay witness may not answer questions about his background. Obviously, background information is relevant to jurors in that it aids in assessing the credibility of fact witnesses and determining the weight to give their testimony. Questions within the unique province of the jury. I would also cite to Lamb, like a little lamb, versus York, 247 Northeast 2nd, 197. Pinpoint site is 202 from Indiana in 1969 for a similar holding, Your Honor. So I think that the argument from counsel for the defendant is completely without merit and should be rejected.
All right. Ms. Nelson?
And, Your Honor, I would just ask for an opportunity. Obviously, I've not had the chance to review the cases that were just cited by the prosecution. So first, I'd just like an opportunity to review them, and if there's anything I need to respond to, I'd ask for an opportunity to do that in the morning. And secondly, I do think it is relevant that we are not disputing some of these issues when the court conducts its 401, 403 analysis, and whether this evidence is cumulative or whether the probative value is substantially outweighed by its prejudicial effect. I think that's a relevant thing for the court to consider when making the 403, 401 analysis.
I agree. I have to rule now because we have witnesses who are going to testify here in just a moment. So the motion is denied. I agree with Mr. Orman. The prosecution has the burden of proof in this case. It is the only party with the burden of proof. And even if the defense is willing to stipulate to certain aspects of the charges, the prosecution is not required to accept that offer. The prosecution is entitled to present its case however it wants. as long as it follows the rules of evidence. And there is nothing improper about asking the types of questions that are the subject of the motion in limine. I have allowed brief background questions, very brief, and I've allowed them especially when they go to a reason or an aspect of the story. For example, to explain why someone went to the theater that night, or to explain why someone went with a particular individual to the theater that night. And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking a witness not only to state their name, but to say, what do you do for a living? I do think that goes to credibility. That doesn't mean that it's bolstering credibility. It's general information about the background of the witness, and the jury is entitled to consider that information in making credibility determinations. I haven't allowed extensive questioning about that. My recollection is that I've allowed a one question type of proposition, one or two, with respect to some witnesses. And with respect to most of those witnesses, the questions have had something to do with the story or something to do with their testimony. In other words, why they ended up at the theater that night, why they ended up going to the theater with the people that they went to the theater with. In terms of military background, I disagree that that's so prejudicial that it substantially outweighs any probative value of the evidence. Number one, to the extent I've allowed it, I believe I've allowed it for the most part because it goes to part of the testimony. Some of the witnesses who have testified have talked about how, as they were making observations during the shooting and they were listening to the sounds, they could tell certain things. Well, the question is, how could you tell that? Why were you thinking that at the time? Why were you experiencing that at the time that the shooting was unfolding? Well, the answer is because I have military background, and in the military I learned the sound of weapons, or I learned the sound of this particular weapon, or I learned about the smell of shotgun or shotgun fire. Those are relevant. They have to be allowed to explain to the jury what they experienced. And in explaining what they experienced, that includes what they saw, what they heard, what they smelled, what actions they took, what actions they didn't take, and why. And the why goes to their background. And to the extent that anyone has testified about military background, I believe that it's been connected to their experience during the shooting, their observations during the shooting. So, but even if someone, just by way of background, says that that's what they do for a living, I don't see that as inadmissible or improper in any way. It's not prejudicial, much less so prejudicial that it substantially outweighs the probative value of the answer, which goes to credibility. So, for all those reasons, the motion in limine, the second motion in limine, like the first motion in limine, is denied. I will follow up and read these cases anyway, and if I change my mind, I'll let you know. And then, Ms. Nelson, you can read the cases as well, and if you want to supplement the record at any time, of course, I'll give you an opportunity to do that. All right, let's bring the jury in, please.
Education is the gift we give our children.
The Education Tax Credit provides scholarships for low and middle income kids in need. It gives parents tax credits for private and religious school tuition, even funds after school programs in thousands of public schools.
You say to your assembly people, I count too, and my child counts, and my choice counts. If you speak up, this will pass.
record should reflect that the jury is back in the courtroom. Please be seated, everyone. Welcome back, members of the jury. I hope you had a good lunch. Thank you for your patience. I've mentioned before that sometimes I have to have discussions with the lawyers outside your presence about administrative things or legal things that the law requires us to talk about without you being here and without you hearing us. But I very much appreciate your patience. Let's have the prosecution call their next witness at this time, please. Mr. Brockler.
Thank you, Your Honor. Bert Herrera, please.
Right here. Have you raised your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. All right, please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names.
Bert Andrew Herrera. First name Bert, B-E-R-T. Last name H-E-R-R-E-R-A.
Mr. Brockler, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, would you, and look, I know you're in a uniform and you have a badge, but I see no gun and I see no handcuffs. What do you do for a living?
I'm a fire medic for the city of Aurora.
How long have you been doing that?
For the city of Aurora for 9 years.
Did you provide emergency medical treatment and services back on July the 20th, 2012?
Yes, I did.
So if we're going to talk about that, I want to ask you, before you became a firefighter for Aurora, do you have any other emergency medical experience?
Yes, I was an EMT prior to that. I worked as a health and safety officer for a water well drilling company, which is my ex-father-in-law. So I was a medic out in the field, as well as wrote the health and safety plans. And then I worked for Unical and Parachute as an underground miner, and I was on the rescue team for them as well.
The rescue team for the miners?
Yes.
Okay. You have a specific kind of schedule as a firefighter, yes?
Correct.
Now, my understanding is it's like 1 day on, 1 week off, or something like that. Is that?
I wish.
What is it really?
We work 3 24-hour shifts. So we work 72 hours a week. We work 24 on, then we're off the following day. 24 on, we're off the following day. 24 on, and then we're off for 4 days.
What time of day does the shift stop and start?
8 a.m. to 8 a.m.
So did you then start on 8 a.m. the 19th of July?
Correct.
All right. Now, tell us, just prior to the call that you received out to the Century 16 or Cinemark theaters, what were you doing?
Well, we were very busy that day. We were out running calls. We heard the dispatch come out and dispatch Engine 8. We came in just as a general shooting. They only thought there was a few victims. And then as they found more, PD was requesting more fire or rescue. And as they found more people, they were dispatching more units. And I was dispatched on the second alarm.
So you say it was a call out to a shooting. In the 9 years that you've been in Aurora, have you been dispatched to a shooting before?
Many.
Always in Adams County, though?
Yes.
I'm kidding. How many shootings do you think you have been out to provide emergency medical training or services?
I can't even count. There's been many, many.
Now, the way the fire department is set up, you're not stationed like right next to the theater. Is that fair?
Yes.
Tell us how you guys are dispersed out and how you ended up getting summoned to a place that's not right next door to you.
Well, Engine 8 is the first new engine there, so they're the closest to that location. It's all based on the number of households, the number of fire hydrants, how spread out the fire departments are, the firehouses. They basically, per your location, they'll dispatch one engine, which is the first due, and then they'll have second due, third due, and it's all based on our CAD system, which is a computer-aided system. And as the request comes out, the computer generates that for the dispatchers, and then they'll send out rigs.
Based on the location of where the Century 16 theater is, where are you in that call-out order?
We were second due, so they dispatched us as well as Engine 5 basically at the same time. They are a little further east than we are, but about the same distance north from the theaters.
Now, you said you have been dispatched out to shootings, sadly, not infrequently in Aurora. Was there anything unusual about this particular call-out that sticks out in your mind?
There's a lot. I mean, PD kept requesting, we just kept hearing them repeat, we need rescue, we need rescue. And, we can only get there as fast as we can get there because they kept finding more and more victims. So we were hurrying as fast as we could, lights and sirens as usual. But upon arrival, there's just police everywhere. It's hard to get into the scene. We were having to weave back and forth through the parking lot. We came in on the north side. There were so many police cars actually that my officer told the engineer to push them out of the way if need be. We didn't go that far. We wove in as far as we could. We grabbed our gear and we were assigned to Engine 8, which was stationed on the north side of the theater, and I was assigned patient care.
A couple things to back up. First off, when you get the call out, are you hearing the police call out and ask for rescue?
Yes.
Now, in a typical shooting situation, what's the tone of voice of those guys?
Usually it's pretty calm, unless there's something very, very serious going on. If there's multiple parties, they may get a little more excited. That night they were obviously excited. I mean, their voices were high. They were basically screaming in the radios too. I guess they were frustrated because they weren't getting enough rigs there quicker than what we could get there.
Does that affect you in the way that you guys feel and the way you go about doing the thing?
Yeah, it does, because we want to be there to help as much as they want us to be there. But like I say, we're limited with the time we can get there by going by truck.
If I put a picture up of that overview area of the theater and the mall, would that help you to be able to tell the jury where you went and what you did?
Yes.
I'm going to ask with the court's permission to publish 4740.
It's been previously admitted, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you may do so.
How about 4739?
That one's been previously admitted as well, right, Mr. Brockler?
Yes, I'm seeing smart people nod. How about 4741? And that one has been admitted as well. All right, sir, if you could, with the court permission, there is this Phil Donahue microphone thing we have going on there. Right there. And can you use our PowerPoint 83 right there to...
Did you think Phil Donahue? That's
I know it dates me. All right. So would you please stand up and make sure that microphone's on? Okay, and would you talk us through how and forgive me, I should have asked this before, were you in a fire truck?
Yes.
And where do you sit in the fire truck, and what's your assigned duty on it?
I sit backwards. I sit right behind the engineer, so it'd be, the driver of the engine, and I'm the primary medic on the engine.
Okay, so talk us through where you guys went to when you first got on scene.
Okay, we came in from the north side. So here's the mall here. The entrance that we came through was right here. We wove our way down through this road here. And like I say, it was just littered with police cars because they had just parked wherever they could. They said there was an active shooter, so they were everywhere. We came in this way. We stopped actually about a little past the Center Point Drive here. We got out of the rig. We walked down this far, and then there's an island right here, and Engine 8 was parked right here. And I was assigned patient care from that point on. There was a lot of shooting victims that were seated there, and we're just waiting for someone to come and assist them.
Now, and is the theater this thing on the...
This is the theater here.
Okay. Let me just describe what I think you've pointed to, and you correct me if I'm wrong, just for the record, okay? You came in at the upper right-hand corner area of this exhibit 4741 and came around the right side of what looks to be the giant mall there, and you worked your way down to sort of the northwestish corner of the theater. Is that fair?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Tell us what happened then.
So from this point on, we brought our bags over. Our crew split. My officer and the other EMT that was on the rig with me, they went around to the opposite side of the building. We stayed here for patient care. From that point, I started treating and getting people loaded up into ambulances and going. I treated approximately 7 people. The first one was an Asian male. He had 2 gunshot wounds, one to his knee, one to his buttock. I got him an IV established, gave him some oxygen, put him on a backboard, and as soon as we could get ambulances into the area, we started loading and getting them going, because ultimately they needed hospital care versus us treating them in the field. Again, the hard part was with all the police cars, we were unable to get ambulances there, and as soon as they figured that out, we had them coming in pretty regular, and we were just getting people loaded and going.
How would you describe the situation?
The situation was kind of eerie, in my opinion. On a scenario like this, you would expect people to be screaming, yelling, a chaotic scene. Everybody seemed to be in shock. They were walking towards us kind of zombie-like. It was actually very amazing, because there were people that were shot that were not wanting treatment. They were saying, this person here is worse off than I am, treat them first. In that situation, I can't dedicate all my time to one person anyway. Like I say, the best thing to do is get them loaded into the ambulance and go to the hospital. So basically, that's what as crew members, that's what we were doing. We were getting them bandaged up as quick as we could, IVs established if they lost blood, and shipped out to the hospital as quick as we could.
Before I have you sit down, sir, I want to ask you, did you move your location and the treatment that you provided from this area that you've already indicated with our stick?
We stayed here the entire time. After I had treated 5 of the patients, they were going to have us go in and pronounce those that were in the theater.
Pronounce them what?
Pronounce them dead. But the officer off the truck, as well as the medic there, had already been inside, and they assured the chief on scene that they had already assessed them and that they were indeed dead. So then they stood us down. They told us there was a possibility of explosives. They stayed just on the north side of the engine there. So we basically used the engine as a shield until they determined that there weren't any explosives. And at that point, we got everybody out of there within 40 minutes, which is pretty amazing for the number of people that we had. And they released us, and we went back in service.
Since we're not going to use this anymore, you can do me a favor and turn off the... Yes, thank you, sir. And thank you. Now, is the level of treatment and care that you provide tied in some way to the number of victims that you have to care for at any given scene?
Yeah, as I stated earlier, when we have that many victims, the best we can do is treat and triage and get going the patients that we have. If it's an individual, if it's a 1 or 2 patient scene that have been shot, I can dedicate more time to them, making sure that, they're assessed better. I do more of a detailed head-to-toe treatment. I make sure that they have IVs established, because inevitably when you get to the hospital, they have to give them blood. So, I try to get all that going, but since we were so close to the hospitals, I basically loaded them and got them going to the hospital.
And when you say loaded them, onto what?
To prams, which are the beds that the ambulances have.
Okay. You had said that there was the call, as you were getting there, was that there was still an active shooter.
That's what we were told.
Did that affect where you went and the treatment that you gave?
No. When we arrived on scene, there was police officers everywhere. And the only thought that went through my mind is, hopefully they'll get them before they get us.
Right. At the time that you're there, is it your practice to try to, in a different situation, to document who you've treated and how you've treated them and their injuries?
Yes, it is.
Were you able to do that here?
No.
So
No,
just a function of the volume?
Yeah. When we have a mass casualty incident like this, again, our first priority is get them to the hospital, get them taken care of. When it's more of an individual type call, I get all their history, all that stuff, and I write a report on it. And basically on this, all I did is document what I did for different patients. Couldn't get their names, any of that stuff. I just basically loaded them and got them going to the ER.
Is it fair to say that to this day you don't know the identities of the people that you ended up helping?
That's correct.
Look, you said you saw 7 total, is that right?
That's correct.
Did each of them have what you consider to be life-threatening injuries?
It's hard to tell. Anytime you're shot,
I'm sorry, sir. I'm going to check at this point. Injuries without kind of being able to say it to any specific people when specific people want to talk about that.
Go ahead, sir.
Whenever there's a gunshot wound, it's hard to tell whether it's life-threatening or not, because you don't know the direction that the bullet takes, whether it ricochets off a bone. You just never know. So anytime we do have gunshot victims, we always use the highest level of care. We always take them in emergent to the hospital because the doctors are the ones that are going to figure that out.
As best you can recall, sir, would you talk us through what injuries you recall for the 7 cases that you had, even if they're not in order?
Yeah, like I say, the first male had a gunshot wound to the buttock as well as his knee. I treated a female that had a gunshot wound to her buttock as well. I treated a male that had a gunshot wound through his right shoulder, and that one had an entry and an exit wound. I treated a gentleman who had looked like a grazing from a bullet on his lower back. Just basically covered that and transported him.
What does that mean, a grazing?
Meaning that the bullet did not penetrate his torso. It just rubbed the skin basically and caused an open wound.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Let's see. I transported 2 that had what appeared to be shotgun injuries. They had pellets as well as lumps all over their bodies, their face, their arms. Those 2 walked up to me towards the end. They were still bringing people out of the backside, and they walked up to me in a zombie state, and we transported them.
A couple things about that. When you were describing that, you brought your hands up to your face and flared out your fingers pointing to your face. What were you trying to show when you did that?
Well, when a shotgun is used, you have pellets that come out, so it's more of a pattern of a spread out pattern where you have multiple injuries all over the face, the arms, torso.
And both of these folks had that?
Yes.
When you say zombie-like, what do you mean by that term?
I mean that they were just had blank stares and were just walking towards me, really not making any noise. The final person I treated, the female, she was crying a little bit once I started talking to her and just said that she needed help. Other than that, everybody was pretty quiet. It was pretty eerie.
Any others that you can recall, sir?
Not that I can recollect.
I have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
What am I leaving out for this again? Thank you, sir. Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Higgs, do you have any questions for this witness?
No, thank you, sir. I have no questions for you.
Okay.
All right, there appears to be a question from the jury. Could counsel please approach jury has submitted a question which, based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law, I have found to be appropriate. The question is, where are you stationed?
I'm at Station 2, which is located basically on Hoffman and close to Peoria, on the north end of the city of Aurora.
Any follow-up questions based on that question?
No, Your Honor.
Any follow-up questions?
No, sir.
All right. May this witness be released from his subpoena?
You may, Your Honor.
Any objection?
Oh, no, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you, sir. Call your next witness, please, Mr. Brockler.
Chris Nyman, please, sir. Sir. Thank you.
You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do, Your Honor.
All right, please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names.
My name is Officer Chris Nyman. It's CHRISNEIMAN.
Mr. Brockler?
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, your flashlight may have gone off or something. There's something that was...
That's good.
Okay, good. Sir, would you please tell us what you do for a living?
I'm a police officer with the city of Aurora.
How long you been doing that?
12 years.
Did you have any law enforcement experience prior to those 12 years?
No.
Do you work a particular shift or beat for Aurora?
I work District 1 on the graveyard shift.
That's a very pleasant name. What hours do you keep for that?
I work from 10 p.m. till 8 in the morning.
What was the first time?
10 p.m. till 8 in the morning.
Okay, and it's 24 on, 24 off for you too?
I work 4/10s.
4/10s, okay. Were you working on July the 19th and July 20th, 2012?
Yes.
What was your assignment at that time?
I was on patrol in District 1 on graveyards.
At District 1, describe what that covers for us.
District 1 is everything in Aurora west of I-225.
Is it routine for you to be called out at an incident that would occur, let's say, at the Century 16 Theater?
Yes.
And you've been there before on different call-outs?
Excuse me, I guess you can ask the question again.
Have you been out there before on call-outs for various things?
Yes.
Have you been called out before in your 12 years on shootings, gunshot victims, that kind of stuff?
Yes.
On this particular early morning hours of 2012, July 20th, 2012, describe for us what kind of call you received.
Dispatch aired that there was a shooting at the Century 16 Theater. And they said that there were multiple gunshot victims.
Was there anything about the tone of voice or the call itself that let you know that this was something special, something different?
Yes, it just didn't seem right.
So what'd you do?
I was on another call with several other officers. We heard the call come out, and we immediately responded Code 3, emergency response to the theater.
Is that what Code 3 means, emergency?
Yes.
Reds and blues?
Yes.
Siren as well, audible?
Yes.
Now, when you're in your vehicle getting there, do you ride with another officer or are you by yourself?
I was riding solo that night.
I want to ask you to take a look at People's Exhibit 4740. I'm sorry? 4740? Your Honor, with court's permission, can I publish that?
Yes, 4740 may be published.
Okay. Do you recognize that, sir?
Yes.
Talk us through where you went with your vehicle when you showed up.
It's actually out of view a little bit.
How about, with the court's permission, 4741?
Okay.
Okay. I came in.
Do me a favor. I'm sorry. Sir, would you grab the microphone and use our special pointer and talk us through where you went? And along the way, I'll ask you what you saw. Okay? Go ahead.
Okay. So I came in from East Alameda Avenue, which is up here.
Came running off of Crystal. I drove along the Ring Road inside the Aurora Mall. This is the Aurora Mall here. I stopped about here on the Ring Road. This is the theater here. And this is where I stopped with my patrol car, approximately right here.
Why'd you stop there?
Because there was people. The front of the movie theater was very chaotic. There was people running everywhere, and cars were trying to leave, and that was as far as I could get to with my patrol car.
When your patrol car got there, where were you in terms of the order of arrival? Were there a lot of emergency vehicles there already, or were you pretty quick?
I was there fairly quick, but I think there's, a lot of units had arrived before I had as well.
When you got there to that part of the theater, did you know what it was you were supposed to do or what you were going to be encountering?
I had no idea what I was going to encounter.
So talk us through that. What did you end up doing?
I immediately got in my patrol car, and several people started yelling at me that there was a male that was shot, and they directed me over to the sidewalk along the Ring Road, approximately probably 20 feet in front of where I parked with my car, and I encountered my first gunshot victim.
All right. Now, when you encountered that gunshot victim, was there anyone with that person at the time?
I don't recall. There were several people that were saying this guy's shot, he needs help. I don't know if anybody was directly with, standing with him or not.
Let me ask you this. In a typical case where you would be called out to a single gunshot victim, would you have spent more time documenting the identity of the person, what they looked like, their injuries, that sort of thing?
Absolutely, I would.
Were you able to do that here this night?
It was almost immediately apparent to me from the traffic on the radio. We had more gunshot victims than I've ever encountered in my career.
So this particular one that I'm going to ask you about, do you to this day know that person's identity?
I know his first name is Kerry.
How do you know that?
Because we asked him what his name was, and he said, "My name's Kerry."
You said we. Who's with you?
Officer Marker.
And did Officer Marker arrive there a different vehicle?
He did.
Now, you get sent over to see this first gunshot victim. Could you tell where the injury was?
Yes.
Where was it?
He had a gunshot wound to his thigh on his right leg.
I don't want this to sound trite, but how bad was it?
To me, it looked pretty bad. I'm not a physician, but it was bleeding profusely, and it appeared he needed immediate medical attention.
So what did you do?
I first applied pressure to his wound.
Using what?
My hands. I observed somebody had tied a belt around his leg prior to my arrival.
Like a tourniquet?
Yes, and they were trying to use it as a tourniquet. It wasn't on there tight enough. I tried to tighten that up. Kerry was in a lot of pain. I told him, he acted like he wanted to punch me. I said, "Go ahead if you need to, man, I got to do this."
Did he?
No, but he was in a lot of pain.
How long did you work with him outside of your vehicle before you guys decided to transport him?
Not very long. I called for rescue, and like I said, the radio traffic, they were saying there were victims all over the place, and the amount of people coming in vehicles trying to leave, and how chaotic the scene was, I knew that we needed to get him transported on our own. There was no way an ambulance or fire was going to be able to find us in this chaotic mess.
Are there lights and sirens going off all around the theater?
There were.
So what did you and Officer Marker decide to do?
Officer Marker, I said, "Let's get him in my car." So Officer Marker assisted me. We put him in the back of the car. At the time, I didn't know Officer Marker stayed in the back of my car. I just started driving to the hospital, and I heard people talking in the back, and I realized Officer Marker was in the back of my car with the victim, Kerry.
And how was this person you know as Kerry doing back there?
Officer Marker was talking to him, trying to keep him calm, but he was in a lot of pain, and we were just trying to get him to the hospital as quickly as we could.
What hospital?
I drove to the Medical Center of Aurora.
And between this place that you've indicated on 4741 and that hospital, describe for us your driving.
So, I was able to get out of Ring Road down to Exposition to exit the mall. I got on Exposition, went over to Sable, southbound on Sable to Mississippi, westbound on Mississippi to Potomac, and southbound on Potomac to the medical center of Aurora.
Fast.
Yes, at a very high rate of speed.
How long did it take you to get there?
I'm approximating 3 to 4 minutes.
How long did it take you once you got to the medical center of Aurora to, for lack of a better term, unload Carrie?
I drove to the rear ambulance bay area where they load people into the hospital. I entered the hospital and said, we have a gunshot victim and expect a lot more from the sounds of what's going on.
When you got there, did you notice, did it seem to you like other gunshot victims had already been there from this incident, or were you the first?
I don't think, from the reaction from the hospital, I was the first to the medical center, or for the medical center Aurora.
Is that where your evening ended? Was you dropping Carrie off there?
No, it wasn't.
How many more trips did you make to the theater and back with injured victims?
After dropping Carrie off, I made 2 more trips to the hospital with victims.
All right. Now, in describing those trips, bless you, in describing those trips, are you going to be describing for us you going any other different directions? And the reason I ask is, if not, I'm going to let you sit down. You tell me.
Yeah, I did go different directions.
And I'm sorry. Tell us about coming back for trip number 2. Tell us what you did.
Again, I wasn't fully aware at the time what the magnitude of this incident was and how many victims we had. So I kind of went back to the same, approximately the same location where I came last time. I came back on Ring Road, and I saw there was a fire truck about here with an ambulance, and they had several people on the ground that they were, the medical, the fire and the ambulance crews were tending to along this little road here, just north and west of the theater.
Where's Marker?
Marker's still with me in the car.
Is he sitting in the front now?
Yeah, he's sitting in the front seat with me now.
What's the back seat look like?
I hadn't looked at the back seat yet.
Are you covered with blood?
At this point in time, I don't know.
How about Marker?
I'm not sure.
What's your focus?
Our focus is just get people to the hospital as quickly as possible.
So tell us what the next thing you did is.
So we contacted the ambulance crew and the fire crew, which was right here. We said, who needs to go? They said these 2 guys need to go. One guy had a apparent gunshot wound to the head. It was wrapped. His head was wrapped with gauze. I'm not sure on the other part. I don't remember.
Were they conscious?
They were conscious and able. We were able to walk them to our patrol car from where they were on the ground. But there was a lot of blood.
You put them in the back seat?
We put them in the back seat.
And then what?
I took the same route back to the medical center of Aurora. So I went out Ring Road, down to Exposition, over to Sable, and down to Mississippi and back to the hospital.
In between that first time you were there and this second time as you're leaving, is the scene different in any remarkable way?
No.
Still chaotic?
Yes.
Okay. Anything that you recall about that trip that you took from this second time at the theater to Aurora hospital?
No, we just got to the hospital as quickly as we could. Officer Marker, then we both helped escort the 2 male victims into the emergency room at the medical center Aurora, and then we again jumped back in our patrol car and headed back to the theater.
On the trip back to the hospital this second time, what are the 2 victims in the car with you doing or saying, or you're saying to them?
Nothing that I can recall.
Are you getting more dispatch air call over the radio and stuff?
Still trying to listen to the radio, but I didn't know what was going on in the theater at this point still. There was a lot of radio traffic, and I just know it was the officers on scene were just calling more and more victims out. So I didn't know how many people were injured. It didn't sound good, though.
Based on your description, I mean, there's a lot of what you're doing here just you're kind of freestyling, your own initiative, trying to get people here, there, and everywhere?
This is like nothing I've ever seen before. Yeah, it was just, we were trying to get people the medical attention they needed.
So you drop off these 2 guys at the hospital. What did you do?
Got back in our patrol car and headed back towards the theater. While en route back to the theater, Sergeant Butler got on the radio and said, we need more cars still at behind the theater, behind auditorium number 9. He goes, we got critical gunshot wound patients that need to get to the hospital.
Before I move to that next group, did you get the names of the two guys, the one with the head wound and the other one?
I never did.
Yeah. So where did you park this third time? Talk us through.
So the third time, so I'm coming up Sable again, and so this is the back of the theater. I ended up, there's a lot of construction going on in Sable at this point in time. Drove across the construction, drove up the grass embankment. It was the quickest way I could find, because I had been to the front. I'd seen how much was blocked in the front of the theater. The best idea I had was to drive up the grass and into the back of the theater over the embankment.
What did you see back there when you got to the back of the theater?
I saw there was one fire truck parked in the back. And other than that, when I pulled up, Sergeant Butler said, "Stay in your car, don't even get out." And at that point in time,
and he's saying that to you over the radio?
No, he was at this point in time. I was in contact. He came up to my patrol car, and Sergeant Butler said, "Stay in your car. We're going to load your car with some more gunshot victims."
I'm going to give you the chance to sit down again if you give the right answer. Is there anything else you need to describe?
Just my exit. Once the victims were loaded in my car, I drove back over the grass embankment and went northbound on Sable. All right. I was told to go to University Hospital.
Go ahead and have a seat, sir, if you would. Let me ask you about, while you sit down, the Sergeant Butler comes up to your car, tells you, "Stay in there, we're just loading people in." Was Marker still with you in that car?
Marker was still seated in the front seat of my patrol car.
Who got loaded into the back of your car?
Adult female and adult male gunshot victims.
How do you know they're gunshot victims?
They were bleeding very bad.
You remember from where?
To the best of my recollection, I don't remember the male as much. He was on the rear passenger side. The females who I saw, because I helped get her out of the patrol car at University Hospital. And I honestly don't know where she was shot, but her chest area and arms was completely saturated in blood.
Any conversations with them on the way to the hospital?
No.
Were they making any noises, saying anything?
They were in extreme pain. Every bump in the road, and I was driving at a high rate of speed again. The brakes at this point in my patrol car were very hot, and it was hard to stop at times. But again, I was just trying to get them to the hospital as fast as I could because I didn't know how critical they were.
That driving that you've been describing to us, have you ever done anything quite like that before?
This whole call was something I could say I'd never done before. Making that many trips to the hospital like that, I would say no. I've never driven like that, and I was just trying to get the people the help they needed.
When you got them to the hospital, you said you helped the lady out from behind you. Did Officer Marker or someone else take care of the gentleman behind?
I know Officer Marker and how I helped get the victims out. I wasn't paying so much attention to what Officer Marker was doing as when we showed up at University Hospital, talk about another chaotic scene, there were patrol cars just packed into behind the emergency room. They had security guards from the hospital bring gurneys out from the hospital because the hospital staff was just overwhelmed. So the security guards were bringing gurneys out of the emergency room, and we were helping load them onto the hospital beds or gurneys. And
did you get sent back to the theater after that?
Well, I did go back to the theater. So the female victim that I helped out, you're asking about her injuries. I just remember she was in a lot of pain, and I had to get her out of the car. I didn't have anybody else there to assist me to get her out of the car, so she put her arm around my neck. I got her out of the car, and she was screaming in pain. And at that point, the security guard heard her yelling, I think, and came over and helped me get her onto a hospital bed and pushed her in the hospital. But she, like I said, she was in severe pain, and she was bleeding pretty bad, but I don't know exactly from where.
Best guess is you didn't get names of those two folks either?
No.
Don't know who they are to this day?
I still do not know who they are.
What happened next?
Me and Officer Marker went back to the theater.
Any more victims for you to take care of there?
When we arrived back at the theater this time, about the time we arrived back at, somebody on the radio said, all the critical gunshot wound patients had already been transferred to the hospital. That was the most law enforcement I've ever seen in my life around that theater. Jurisdictions that I didn't even know were close enough to arrive at that theater were there, and we were told we weren't really necessarily needed at the theater anymore, and they asked for more officers to head to University Hospital to provide security at the emergency room.
Is that where you went?
And then Officer Marker got out and went back to locate his vehicle, and I drove back to the hospital.
If you had to estimate for us the amount of time that elapsed from the time you first contacted that man named Kerry until you got to the hospital the third time with those last two folks, do you have a sense of how long that was, how much time had elapsed?
I hadn't really thought about that before. 20, 25 minutes maybe. That would be my best guess.
I have a moment here.
Yes.
Nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Brady, any questions? Okay. The jury doesn't seem to have any questions, so may this witness be released from his subpoena, Mr. Brockler?
Mayor.
Any objection? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Call your next witness, please. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of blood that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names?
It's Marcus Jerome Weaver, Marcus, Jerome, Weaver.
Mr. McGuire, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Weaver, were you at the Century 16 movie theater in Aurora, Colorado on July 19th of 2012?
Yes, ma'am.
And did that go into the early morning of July 20th of 2012?
Yes, ma'am.
Thinking back to that day of July 19th, 2012, what do you remember about that day before going to the movie theater?
I met a friend by the name of Rebecca Ringo about a month prior, and she was really excited about learning more about Batman, so I brought over a couple movies. Me and her two daughters watched them, and she was very excited about going to the movies. So that morning of the 19th, she reminded me about getting the tickets to go to the midnight premiere, because I had the week off for my job. And so around lunchtime, I got another phone call from her and said, "Did you remember to get the tickets?" And I said, "No." And so I went over to the movie theater at that point, and not only got tickets for the midnight premiere, but I knew I would like it so much, I got tickets for the next day too.
So after you did that, what time did you and Rebecca plan to meet up to go see the movie?
Well, Rebecca just recently got a new job for a medical supply company, and so she got off about 10:30, and just like Rebecca, she gave someone a ride home. So the plan was to meet at the movie theater about 11:45 before the movie started. That way we can get hot dogs and all that kind of stuff. So I went and got the tickets about 6, and then came back. I would say about 10:30 to make sure I could get the best seat I could.
Right, and do you recall where you parked when you got to the movie theater?
Parked my car? Mm-hmm. I don't really recall where I parked at, but I know I drove to the theater myself.
Okay. And what did you do when you got to the movie theater at 10:30?
It was kind of a madhouse. There was people dressed up in Batman costumes. just a lot of kids there because it was in the summertime. Just everybody was in this festive mood. Usually the first thing you notice when you walk into the Aurora Theater is they have some police officers there. They weren't present, so it's just a lot of people everywhere. And so I went into the theater. I went into through the lobby, got my ticket for Theater 9, and walked through the doors. Went up the right side to the right side, and not the left, and looked over, saw my friend Kaylin Bailey and two of her friends I thought were her friends, and didn't want to say hi to her because I didn't want to embarrass her. And so I ended up getting seats about 2 or 3 rows behind her in the middle. And I thought at the time they were the best seats, so I put down my red Butts Warehouse sweatshirt right there to hold my seat, and then proceeded to go outside and wait for Rebecca's arrival.
Now I want to ask you about a couple things you just said. So one was that it seemed to me that you said you had experience going to this theater.
I've been to the theater plenty of times. It's $5. It's pretty cheap.
Is it in close proximity to where you lived at the time?
At the time, about 2 miles away.
And then you said that you recall there being a lot of children there. Did you ever have an opportunity to see those children in the lobby area, the concession area?
They were pretty much everywhere. A bunch of teenagers of just all different kind of ages, sizes, shapes. Everybody was excited about this movie.
Now, do you remember what theater number you went into?
It was Theater 9.
And then you said once you got in there, how'd you go about choosing your seats?
Well, I wanted to sit somewhere in the middle, so I don't really see that well, and I knew I was going to like the movie, so went up about 5 steps, it seems, 5 or 6, and there was a spot right open right in the middle, and so I put my Butts Warehouse red sweatshirt right there, and it saved both spots. So.
And you said you ran into your friend Kaylin Bailey.
Yeah, she was sitting, I guess about 2 or 3 rows up, and she was having a good time. So I didn't want to bother her or bug her or act like, hey, Kaylin, in front of her friends. So I didn't.
And how did you know her?
I know her from church. So I've known her since she was about 10 years old. Her grandmother cooked food at the church in the city, and we all served on the Wednesday night team, and that's where we serve food to the homeless, and we treat them, like a restaurant. And that's also where I met my wife and son Mitchell.
Now, you said she was seated about 3 rows up. Does that mean like 3 rows in front of you in the theater?
3 rows in front of me in the stadium seating.
So after you put your sweatshirt on these seats, what'd you go do?
Just went back to the lobby. I went back outside. Went out and smoked a cigarette. I smoked then, and I just waited. Probably smoked like 2 or 3 cigarettes waiting. And I kept calling her, and I was like, "Where you at? It's ready to go." So, because I was getting excited about the movies, I get anxious a little bit about seeing Batman. So,
anxious, excited.
Very excited. Very excited.
And you said you were waiting for her. Was that Rebecca Wingo that you were waiting for?
Yes, ma'am.
So, did Rebecca show up?
She did show up. Of course, I'm like, "You're always late." And so we laughed about that. And then she said she was hungry. And so we proceeded to go inside the theater. She had parked on the right side. She had a Subaru, so she parked over there. And then we went inside the movie theater, handed over the tickets. I had been out so much, the guy knew who I was, so I didn't need my ticket. And went through the concession line. She wanted a hot dog, a soda, and some popcorn. And I said, of course, she's like, "I'll pay you back when I get paid." And I was like, "No problem." And so we went inside the theater and we got our seats in anticipation of the movie.
Now, what'd you do while you were waiting for the movie to begin?
Just had a small chit-chat conversation. I can't remember anything, but she asked me, was I getting sick of her? And I said, "How could I get sick of you? You're pretty cool." And just chit-chat about her kids and, things of that nature. Nothing big about what happened at work and stuff like that. No, nothing major.
Do you remember anything unusual happening at all before the movie began?
It just was a lot of people. There was a lot of just movement. It was a lot of just people everywhere, and so it was just kind of chaotic in that sort of sense. But everybody was just really, 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 really excited. When the previews came on, people were clapping. So that's how festive it was.
Now, at that time, how full would you describe the theater being?
Well, when I set my sweatshirt down, luckily it was maybe like 3/4, I would say half to 3/4 full, and so that's why I was really excited about our seats, because I was like, wow, what a score. which I thought at the time. And so it was just starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger. They had started to open up. It got so big, so many people wanted to see the movie that they started to open up other theaters. And so my thought was maybe I should move to another theater, but I didn't.
And so was almost every seat full in your theater?
Yes, ma'am. Once the movie started, and we sat back in our seats before it started, you could see that every seat was filled and people were just excited, and we were looking forward to the movie.
Do you recall if there were previews before the movie?
Yes, ma'am.
And then at some point in time, did Batman begin?
Yeah, Batman began, and everybody started clapping. We were all excited. It started with the part where I guess I forget the main character. I forget his name. And he was in an airplane, and that's what started the movie. And then it went further on to where Alfred was talking to Bruce Wayne about not being Batman anymore.
And then what happened?
And then all of a sudden, just from out of the blue, there was as you're looking at the screen, and I was right in the center, and she was on my right side, and I was on the left. And as you look at the screen on the right side, it seemed like there was some type of bomb that was right across the bottom row. And we're sitting here in the fifth row right here. And I just recall, I just looked over Rebecca, and this was one of the last things I said to her. I said, I can't believe someone's lighting off a smoke bomb. Then I had to consider that we had, a lot of kids there maybe playing a prank. We didn't have fireworks that year. And so I can understand why someone would do that. And then sometimes you go to a Rocky Horror film and they do pranks and things like that, and people were dressed up. And so, I really thought it was just a joke.
And just to be clear for the record, when you said, about the fifth row up, you're talking about fifth row up in the stadium section of
yes, ma'am.
The theater. So after you see this, what you think is a smoke bomb going across the theater, what do you remember happening after that?
Well, the smoke came across the movie, so you couldn't see the screen, and it just, Joey was just in a state of just like disbelief that this would happen, and so really didn't know what to do. But the thing that sticks in my mind, and the thing that I'll never forget as long as I live, is a person came out on the right side, and it seemed like there was 2 shots fired at the roof, and the roof came down, and then all of a sudden, you just hear this thunderous noise. I mean, it was so loud that like it was hurting your ears and would shake your body, and so you would see just the white silhouette of, his gun, and this white flash that was like this wide, and you could see the silhouette of the shooter, and it looked like he had a football helmet on, looked like he had some gear on, but he was doing a motion like this, and the white light just kept moving and moving and moving and moving and moving and moving, and finally, I think after maybe the 10th shot, I got Rebecca down, and myself down on the ground, and the seats that were, that it wasn't that big, and at the time I didn't have a beach body, so I thought for sure I was going to get hit.
All right. With the court's permission, Your Honor, Mr. Weaver was just demonstrating with his hands, and he was making a motion that with both of his hands outstretched, going from right to left and going back from right to left, and like the record to reflect that. If I could have a moment, Your Honor. Yeah. And so what I would like to do with the court's permission is ask Mr. Weaver to step down to be able to make that motion in an area right here where the jury would be able to see him.
Well, I think the jury can see him from right there. So if you just stand up and do that motion, that's fine. You can do it from right there. Okay?
Okay.
Right, so if you could just stand up, Mr. Weaver, where you're seated, and if you could just repeat that motion and describe for the jury what you believe the shooter was doing.
Well, what he did was he walked in.
Here, why don't you grab the microphone right here, this one, the handheld. Turn it on. There you go.
All right. So what happened was, when he walked into the theater on the right-hand side, you could see this big, this light, and he just kept firing. But you could see him moving this way and that way, and moving this way and that way, and so the light would move with it, but the noise remained the same, just boom, boom, just like thunder. It would shake your body, and so as I was sitting on the ground, I could see through the crack of the seat what was going on and still see a silhouette. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weaver. And when you did that, the first time you were using 2 hands, and this time you were holding a mic in one hand. And so, just for the record to be cleared, what do you recall the shooter having? Do you have 1 hand or do you have 2 hands?
Well, it's hard to say but the gun was so loud, it appeared that it was a large weapon, not a small weapon. So I assumed that shooting I'll use the mic as the gun.
That the record will reflect that Mr. Weaver is holding the microphone with his right hand in front of his left hand, and he has two hands on the microphone, which he is demonstrating if that were a weapon. Thank you very much, Mr. Weaver. You may have seen. So, and you had also talked to the jury about the fact that you said it seemed like she had shot up into the ceiling and that the ceiling was coming down. Can you describe what you're talking about when you're seeing the ceiling coming down?
Well, with the smoke going on and movies still going on, it seems as if there was two shots or some shots that were fired at the ceiling, and it looked like some things came down from the ceiling, and it just was all weird. And then all of a sudden, the gunfire started, and then the white light and all that from the corner, and so it was very. At first, it was hard to grasp my head around what was going on, and so once people started screaming and getting hit, it became from a surreal situation to a dangerous situation. So it warranted me to get down on the ground and get Rebecca down on the ground as well.
So is that what you did? In fact, did you get down on the ground, and did you get Rebecca down on the ground?
Yes, I sure did.
And could you describe for the jury how you got both of you down on the ground?
I just pushed her down and pushed me down too, and we were just sitting right there, and she wasn't moving, but I could see him through the crack of the seat, and the seat was only this big in front of us. And so my main concern at the time was Rebecca, the fact that she wasn't moving, and the safety of others around me. I wasn't really concerned about my own safety.
And Mr. Weaver, you had just demonstrated two things: a crack that was in front of you, and then you also said the seat that was, up above you. How approximately long or short would you say that crack was in front of that you were looking out of?
I'll say that crack's about this big right here.
Would you estimate that to be an inch, 2 inch? What do you think?
It's hard to say, but maybe an inch to 2 inches.
And you kept trying to peek through that?
That was the only way I could see the shooter. I looked there, and then as soon as you start shooting, I would put my head down. Then I would see him for a while, and then it would just get so loud that you would just put your head down and hope that it didn't hit you, but you could hear it hitting objects. You could hear it whizzing by your head. You can hear it, the bullets just, people screaming, people saying I've been shot, I'm hurt, and just not being able to do anything because you don't really know where the bullets are, coming from, or that kind of deal from the shooter.
What are you thinking during this time?
I was thinking about Rebecca and her well-being and seeing if she was okay, but she wasn't moving. Just thinking about everybody around me. I mean, people at the time were coming down the middle and stepping on my back, and my face is grounded with nasty sludge from the floor, and still looking through the corner of the seat every time the shooter would fire from that corner, and you could see he had some type of helmet on, some type of gear with the flash, and you could see him pretty clearly, but the only thing you couldn't do is see his face.
And why was that?
Because of the distance, it was really basically from here to that corner over there. I would say that's how far he was away. And so,
I'm going to stop you for 1 second, Mr. Weaver. The record can reflect that Mr. Weaver just pointed to the corner in the room. Are you talking about the far corner? Apologize. Are you talking about the farthest corner in the room?
I would say that farthest corner of the room. If I was sitting in the theater, distance-wise, I would say.
That's about how far you were away from the shooter.
From him. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Your Honor.
So is that about 20 feet, would you say?
A little bit longer than that. I mean, I'm not it's hard to say, but he was in the corner, and where he came in, we were in the 5th row, and their stadium is about, 6 or 7 rows, so I would say maybe 80 to 100 feet.
So you said Rebecca wasn't moving. Had you tried to talk to Rebecca at all? Had you had any communications with her at that point?
Well, at that time, I was just more concerned that she didn't get hit by bullets, or I didn't get hit by bullets, and so I was trying to protect both of us at the same time, but looking at the shooter at the same time, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of all this chaos and all these things that were going on, this voice in my head said that he was going to stop shooting, and when he stopped shooting, you leave the theater. And so at first I was just like, there's no way I'm getting up and I'm going to be able to move. And so I was just sitting there, and then all of a sudden, I would say about 20 to 30 seconds later, he just stopped shooting. And so that was my cue to get up and try to get out of the theater. So I grabbed Rebecca, picked her up. There were people coming down the middle. they were coming down the roads. It seemed like it was time for a max exodus for all the people who were, behind the seats, hiding or had someone injured. And so I tried to pick her up with my left hand side, and people just knocked me over, and she fell right back into the same seat that she was in. And then I fell over and hurt my knees pretty bad and my foot. But most importantly, I just wanted to get out of the theater. And during this melee of just these people going everywhere, all of a sudden there was a different noise that came up, and it sounded as if it was a different type of gun, not the same gun as the rifle that was firing all the shots.
And what did that gun sound like to you?
It was just more like a boom, boom, as opposed to the thunderous noise. It was just more like boom, boom. It was definitely distinct from the other gun. There was two differences with the gun.
Now, you said that you had fallen pretty bad. Could you describe for the jury how you had fallen?
Well, we're in the fifth row, and so when people start rushing us, she fell right back, and I kind of crisscrossed over the bottom seats all the way almost to the corner. But once again, he started shooting again once everybody started coming down, and so I was just the things that I saw and the people that were hurt as I was exiting the other side of the theater, not the right side, but the left side. People was crawling to the exit. Some guy was shot in his hand. It was just pretty horrific scene, but I figured if I could go out to make it out of the theater, then I could tell a police officer to come in, or maybe the police were on their way. And so that was my mindset at that time.
Now, did you attempt to bring Rebecca out with you, or how did you end up leaving?
I totally attempt to pick her up. Obviously, she was pretty heavy and she wasn't moving at all or lifeless, but as a believer, I just had hope that she might be still alive, or something may happen. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't get her out of the theater because there were bodies coming down. I mean, there was people walking down. There was bodies in the row. It just made it difficult, and being knocked over, it didn't help at all either.
And could you describe, were you knocked over into your row, or you knocked over rows in front of you?
I was knocked over rows in front of me and went this way. And so it was just, once those gunshots started going off again, it just raised a level of anxiety I never felt before, and I just was in a panic and just wanted to get out of that theater. And I knew if I could make it out of that theater, then I could get Rebecca some help.
So how did you end up exiting the theater?
Well, I obviously got my bearings, and then I went out that left side of the theater door, went and got into the lobby, and once I got in the lobby, there was other movie theaters converging towards the door, towards the front, and so it's this mass exodus. As officers were coming in, we were coming out, and there were people crawling towards the door, people that were hurt, people just didn't know what to do. And as I made it outside, I told the police officer my friend Rebecca was in there and she needed some help, and he said, "We'll take care of it." And so I went outside, and I was standing there in the parking lot where over hundreds of people were sitting out there crying, not knowing what's really going on. And so the first thing you do as a kid is you call your mom. So I called my mom, then I called a roommate friend, and they didn't want to come pick me up because they said I shouldn't have been at the movies anyway. And so then I called a coworker, and he didn't answer because it was so early. My mom didn't either because it was so early. And so at that time, this little girl comes up to me and says, "Your arm's bleeding." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And I looked over at my arm, and sure enough, it was bleeding all over my shirt. And so I lifted up, and there was two little bullet holes right there, and I lifted up my shoulder.
Happy for 1 second, if the record could reflect that Mr. Weaver just pointed to his right shoulder and pointed that there were two bullet holes in his right shoulder. Thank you. So after you had noticed that, you pulled up your shirt, you saw two bullet holes.
And it was just blood just streaming down my arm. And so at that point, I went over to talk to the police officer again and told him that, that I was shot. And he said, "Well, you need to get to the hospital. We can't tell the wounds came out." But I said, "I'm not leaving until I find out what's going on with my friend Rebecca." And they promised me that everybody would be evacuated a few times. And so I just went over to one of the ambulances, and they took me to, I think it's Parker Adventist Hospital. And so that's what basically happened after that.
Your Honor, if I may approach Mr. Weaver with what's been marked as People's Exhibit 1177.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver, do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that?
It's a diagram of Theater 9.
All right, and do you recognize the handwriting on that diagram?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, whose handwriting is it?
That's mine.
All right, and what does that diagram depict?
It depicts how I entered the theater, how I was in the theater while the movie was going on, and how I exited, and also where Kaylin was sitting and where Rebecca was sitting.
All right, and did you draw everything on that diagram?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it fairly and accurately represent what you believed happened in the theater on July 20th of 2012?
100%. Yes, ma'am.
Now there's some markers in front of you, Mr. Weaver. If you could please print your name and sign your name and put today's date on that diagram. I believe today is the 29th.
Do I need to put the year?
Please. Thank you. Your Honor, at this time I would move for admission of that exhibit.
Any objection to 1177? All right, without objection, 1177 is admitted.
Thank you, Your
It
Honor.
may be published.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Weaver, I'm going to ask you a favor. I'm going to ask you to get that cordless microphone again. And I'm going to ask you to grab that pointer stick that's behind you. And you're going to see your diagram pop up on the screen here. If you could please show the jury, first of all, how you came into the theater.
Okay. So, I was by myself at first, and so when I came in through, let me see, this way right here. And then I went up these steps, and then I saw Kaylin right here. Didn't want to bother her, and then I went up to the rows, and there it was, the stream spot right here. And so I put my coat down there, and then I went back out this way, and went outside and waited for Rebecca. And then when we both came back in with our food, went back up, decided about the seats. Everybody started cheering.
And who was seated where? If you could tell the jury.
Oh, sorry. Rebecca's seat was she was on the right side, and I was on the left.
Okay, thanks. And then what does that diagram also depict? Where you saw that, like what you said was a smoke bomb earlier? Is that depicted on that diagram?
About 10 minutes into the movie, like I said, when Alfred was talking to Bruce Wayne, there was a type sound, and it seemed like it was a canister, but smoke was emanating out of it, and it went all the way over through here, and then hit the wall, and then it seems like the smoke just started coming across. And then that's when I heard it seemed like what I had heard was 2 shots that hit the roof, and there was some stuff that came down from the roof. Then all of a sudden, that's when the gunman opened fire with his gun and just was moving right to left from right at this angle right here. Yeah, it looks like he entered the door there and just started shooting.
And you also have notated on there some white flashes. Is that where the area where you saw
Yes,
the white
it was all right here. It was like he was positioned here, so there was no way that you can actually get to him. It was almost he barricaded himself.
See objection? Right. You're talking about your observations only, okay? So do not speculate about anything. All right. So ask the question again, Ms. Tish McGuire.
Sure. The area that you saw the white flashes, do you recall where that is?
It's this area right here.
And then where's the area where you saw the silhouette of the shooter?
It's right here too. Same place.
Where's the area where you had described for the jury about what you saw the shooter kind of going from right to left and left to right?
Same area. Because we had sat down and seen the first wave of bullets that went through, because we just couldn't wrap our heads around that actually someone will be in the movie theater shooting at on our crowd.
And by the way, the objection by Ms. Spengler is sustained. Sorry, I should have said that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Weaver, can you use the pointer to show the jury how it was where you kind of fell over and describe for them how that happened?
Okay. So once he started shooting, we realized that it wasn't a prank. We both got down on the ground right here, and she wasn't moving. And that's when that voice in my head said that, you should, when he stopped shooting, you get up and move the theater. And then all of a sudden, he stopped for longer than the normal interval, which was about 2 seconds before. And this time it was a little bit longer, so that was my key to get up, grab her. She fell back. A lot of people who were hiding in here came down, knocked me over. A lot of people came down the rows, and so I just did this kind of weird thing where I just falling over all over, and luckily I ended up on this side, so I was able to exit the theater, and that's when I saw all this stuff coming through. And as I exit out here into the lobby, people just converged into the doors, and police officers were coming in at the same time.
All right, thank you very much. You may have a seat. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. So I think we're at the place where you had told us that you had gone to the hospital.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you could tell us what happened when you got to the hospital.
Well, when I got to the hospital, there wasn't a lot of people there. It was kind of farther out. Park of Venice, it wasn't one of the busier ones. And so they were able to give me some immediate treatment. They took me into the x-ray room to see where the bullets were that were lodged in my arm. And so a detective came and asked me some questions. The TV was on. People were just asking about what happened, and I was getting phone calls from different folks. And so all these things were going on, and the doctor finally told me that the bullets, the pellets that were in my arm, shrapnel, whatever it was, could not come out because they were so deeply embedded into my shoulder that it would take a month or so to move.
Your Honor, if I may approach Mr. Weaver with what's been marked as 2025, 2024, and 2026.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Weaver, if you could please look at that first photograph and tell me if you recognize the person in that photograph.
That would be Marcus Weaver.
All right. And do you, what was the exhibit number on that?
It's exhibit 2025.
And was that on July 20th of 2012?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it fairly and accurately represent what you looked like at the hospital on July 20th of 2012?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Right. And Your Honor, this time I would move for the admittance of a People's Exhibit 2025.
Any objection? All right, without objection, it is admitted.
It may be
published, yeah.
Right, so that was you on July 20th, 2012 at Parker Venice Hospital.
Yeah, I mean, at the time I'm watching the TV, like I said before, so. Yep.
And then if you could tell us about the next photograph. And tell us the number first, please.
The number is People's Exhibit 2024.
And what does that photograph depict?
And it depicts the wounds that I suffered from the shot from the weapon.
All right, and does it fairly and accurately represent your injuries on July 20th of 2012?
Absolutely.
And at this time, I'd move for the admittance of People's Exhibit 2024.
Any objection? All right, without objection, it is admitted and may be published.
Thank you, Your Honor. Right, if you could describe for the jury what they can see there.
Basically, it shows kind of what I talked about. When I lifted up my shirt, you could see the blood coming out. It seems like it was, they stopped a little bit, so it didn't bleed as much. It wasn't pouring out like it was before. And that's a tattoo.
And if you could use the pointer and the microphone again, Mr. Weaver, to show where how many wounds there are on that picture, please.
It's right here and right here.
Thank you very much. And then if you could describe, see if you noticed what the next picture is about.
Exhibit 2026, and it's a picture of my right knee.
And what is that picture of the right knee?
When I fell over and the shooter shooting with the shotgun, I think it's grazed my knee, and didn't go through my knee, but it could have been sustained through an injury. It's hard to tell, but it's definitely scarred. Yes.
Without objection, it is admitted and may be published.
Mr. Weaver, what sort of medical treatment did you have to have for the injuries to your arms?
What happened was the bullets weren't removable at the time. I had to wait about, I would say about 30 days, and I had insurance to my job. So I went to go see a hazard doctor and said that if they could do surgery to take them out whenever I wanted them to be taken out. So the bullets were taken out, and as soon as they took them out, There's a police officer who took him, so it's kind of surreal. My arm just continued to get numb over the next 2 years, and so
this is a result of the same incident? Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. You can answer the question, Mr. Weaver.
So, after they took the bullets out, my arm would get numb for over 2 years, and so caused me not to bowl, not to do anything, my normal activities, and so obviously I gained a lot of weight and got pretty depressed about it. And so,
wait, hold on. Let's just say it's going too far.
All right, sorry, Mr. Weaver. If you could just talk about the additional medical treatment that you needed.
Talking about the medical treatment.
well, 2 years later, they had to do surgery again on my arm. They had to take off a piece of my clavicle bone and my acromion bone to free up the joint, so my arm wouldn't get numb. And that was November of this past year, last year.
I know you're going to require any additional surgeries.
No, I don't think so. I went through physical therapy and I'm starting to feel better about mine, so I don't think I will further treatment.
Senator, if I may approach Mr. Weaver with what's been marked as People's Exhibit 4729.
Yes.
Mr. Weaver, do you recognize the person in that photograph? Who is that person? Did you ever see this window alive again after you left the theater on July 20th of 2012?
No, ma'am.
We have a moment, Your Honor.
Are you moving the admission?
Sorry, Your Honor, I am moving the admission of that exhibit, please.
Any objection? Without objection, 4729 is admitted and may be published.
Mr. Weaver, did you have an opportunity to observe Rebecca's injuries?
It was really chaotic and dark, and she wasn't moving. So when I picked her up, and she fell back into the seat, she was not moving. I didn't notice any blood or anything. She just was not moving. It was pretty lifeless, and heavy at the same time. And then all of a sudden, the onslaught of the other folks. So didn't really notice any gunshot wounds or anything like that.
So were you able to determine at the time if she was breathing when you left the theater?
It was hard to say. Like I said, I try to think for the best, but at the same time, she wasn't moving the last time I saw her. So,
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that the People's Last Exhibit 4729 be published.
I got it.
Oh, thank you, Your Honor. And could you please tell the jury who that is?
It's Rebecca and Wingo.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any questions, Ms. Spengler? All right, it looks like the jury has some questions, sir, so I'm going to ask you to wait for just a moment. Thank you. It looks like there are multiple questions, and so rather than have you wait while we talk about these questions here, let's take our afternoon break. Please keep all my advisements in mind. All of them continue to apply. I'm going to ask Mr. Weaver to step out so that the lawyers and I can talk about the questions outside his presence, and then when you get back, we'll proceed at that point, okay?
Can I go to the bathroom?
You can stay here for just a moment. All right, enjoy the break, folks. Let's take 20 minutes, okay? The jurors have now exited the courtroom. Mr. Weaver, I'm going to ask you to step out. And yes, you can go to the restroom. You can go right. Everybody may be seated. The record should reflect that Mr. Weaver has now exited the courtroom. So we are now outside the presence of the jury and outside the presence of the witness. The jury has submitted multiple questions, and so I'm going to go through these one by one and ask counsel for their position. First, on the question form that I have designated as number 15, the following questions appear. The first one is, did witness say no police in lobby area when I think it says when normally present, I'm not sure. And then underneath it says at time of arriving 10:30 p.m. So did witness say no police in lobby area when normally present at time of arriving 10:30 p.m.? Do the people have a position? Any objection? Ms. Spengler? All right, I'll ask that question without objection. The next question is, I guess it's an explanation for why the question is being asked. It says wording a little garbled and softer at the end of the sentence. So that's not a different question. That's just an explanation for why the question is being submitted. Next, I have the question on the form that I have marked as number 16. How long was it from the time the shooting began to when you made it to the lobby? Any objection? Any objection? Without objection, I will ask the question. Next, the question that appears on the form that I have marked as number 17 is as follows. Did you see the shooter move any closer to the victims than by the exit near the screen? Any objection?
No objection.
Any objection from you, Ms. Spengler? Okay, without objection, I will ask the question. And finally, on the question form that I have marked as number 18, there appear to be multiple questions, and so I'll go through these one by one. The first question is, after the initial shooting, did you see the shooter walk through the theater? Any objection?
No objection.
Any objection? Ms. Spengler? The second question is, what did you see through the crack? Any objection?
No objection.
Ms. Spengler, any objection?
Yes, there will be an objection.
It has been asked and answered, but the juror may have missed it. So that's one of the, this is one of the reasons the law allows jurors to ask questions. It's possible that the juror missed it. So I'll allow it over objection. The next question is, did the shooter move? And that is on the same line as the last question, so it may be related to the last question. Any objection to that question?
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Spengler, any objection?
Final question. Instructed witness. Trainees, I just worry that with the open-end.
Well, I think that question is speculating about him speculating. The questions, these two questions that I just read are not open-ended, or to the extent that they're open-ended, don't concern me that they're going to lead him to speculate. The one question is, what did you see through the crack? That's specifically asking what he saw. And the next question is, did the shooter move? Now, if he starts going into an area where it sounds like he's speculating, make an objection and I will stop him as I did before. Next is, how long did all of the shooting go on? Any objection? Ms. Spengler? Well, we've been through 15. You want me to go back to 15?
Yes, I made a mistake.
Well, you said you had no objection before. I think it is relevant. So even if you have an objection, it is overruled. Next, I have the question. I think was, how long did the shooting? Did all of the shooting go on? And you said you have no objection. Is that right, Ms. Spengler? All right, the next question is, where in the theater did the second series of gunshots come from? Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Any objection, Ms. Spengler?
If no objection, this is modified as
I think that's fair, and I will do that. Finally, the question is, where was the shooter when you ran out of the theater? Any objection?
no objection, Your Honor.
Any objection, Ms. Spengler?
No objection is the same.
That request is granted. I think that's a fair request, and I will add if you know at the beginning of the question. Okay, those are all the questions I have. We'll go on break. Enjoy the break. I'll see you back here in about 15. The court will be in recess. Right before the break, Mr. Weaver was still on the witness stand, and some of the jurors had submitted some questions. I have had a chance to review those questions and to talk about it with the attorneys while Mr. Weaver was outside the courtroom so that he couldn't hear our conversation. And based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law, I have decided that all of these questions are appropriate, although I have modified a couple of them. And so I'm going to ask all these questions. Mr. Weaver, the first question is as follows. Did the witness say no police in lobby area when normally present at the time of arriving at 10:30 p.m.?
When I came at 6 o'clock, the first thing I noticed, there was no police there. And then the same thing I noticed that when I came back at 10:32.
The next question is, how long was it from the time the shooting began to when you made it to the lobby?
It's hard to say because things were just going in like slow motion. So, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. But it was going so slow. It seemed like it was an eternity being on the floor of the theater. So.
The next question is as follows. Did you see the shooter move any closer to the victims than by the exit near the screen?
When he started, he was shooting with the gun, and then it got jammed, and I got up and grabbed Rebecca. It sounded like he was moving because the sound of the gun as I was falling over the steps, it sounded like he was moving in a different area, which made me more scared and more afraid because it sounded like he was moving around the theater because it wasn't coming from the same place and it wasn't the same sound. So,
the next question is, after the initial shooting, did you see the shooter walk through the theater?
After he did his first shots of the AR-15, or?
Let me read the question again. After the initial shooting, did you see the shooter walk through the theater?
No, he stayed in that corner as if he was positioned there, and he was just fine.
Just answer the question.
Yep.
So the question is, he stayed in that corner. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. The rest of the answer is stricken. The next question is, what did you see through the crack?
What I saw was it's just this white silhouette. I mean, this white light, and you could see the silhouette of the gunman, and he had something on his head. You could tell he had some gear on, as if he was wearing a football type outfit. And so he just kept. You could tell he was moving. It was moving, but at the same time, he was stationary in the same place. He just never. So, does that answer your question?
I believe you've answered the question.
Okay.
The next question is, did the shooter move?
I want to say yes, just the simple fact that.
Well, let me stop you there. The question is, did the shooter move? And it's asking whether you have knowledge of that, whether you saw it. Hold on. Whether you observed it or not. You're not allowed to speculate.
Okay.
So, did the shooter move?
Yes, he moved because the gunshots came from different. You could hear it from different places. So obviously, he moved from the corner.
The next question is, how long did all of the shooting go on?
Like I said before, it's hard to estimate or guess. I mean, wasn't looking at my watch to see how long it was, but it feared like it was eternity. So when something was going on like that, but in reality, it was 10 to 15 minutes.
The next question is, if you know, where in the theater did the second series of gunshots come from?
The second series of gunshots, you're talking about the shotgun?
I'm just reading the question from the jury.
The shotgun, when I started shooting the shotgun, it was, you could hear it from different directions, and as I was falling down, you could hear it as if it was coming like straight over this way or straight over that way, but not from the corner anymore.
And the final question is, again, if you know, where was the shooter when you ran out of the theater?
The shooter was still shooting. You could still hear the shotgun going off as I was leaving the theater on the left side of the theater.
Any follow-up questions, Mr. McGuire?
Yes,
So one of your first questions that you answered, Mr. Weaver, was regarding whether there were any police officers when you arrived at the theater inside the lobby. And you said, I think you said not at 6:30 and not at 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you left the theater after the shooting and you were running out of the lobby, were there any police officers?
Absolutely. They were coming in as I was leaving. They were coming on my left side as I was trying to get to the door, just like everyone else.
And then the other question that you just answered, one of the questions that you just answered was that you described what the shooter was wearing as like football gear. What do you mean by that?
Well, it looked like he had some type of helmet on, and he had some type of gear. And it was hard to say if it was protective gear or whatever, but through the silhouette, you can see that his shape was not of like, say, if he didn't have anything on. It looked like he had some type of equipment on, and so you couldn't really tell what it was, but it looked like some type of protective gear that a football player would wear. So that's why I use that analogy.
So some sort of bigger padding around.
Absolutely, yeah.
No further questions, thank you.
Any follow-up questions, Ms. Spangler?
Yeah.
May this witness be released from his subpoena?
Please, Your Honor.
Any objection? All right, sir, thank you. Call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, the people call Officer Natasha Cavaway.
Thank you, sir. You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
All right, please be seated. Could you please tell us your full name and spell your first and last name?
Natasha Cabway, Natasha, last name Cabway, CAB as in boy, OUET.
Ms. Pearson, you may proceed.
Officer, where do you work? Aurora Police Department.
And are you a police officer?
Yes.
How long have you worked at the Aurora Police Department?
5 years.
Did you work in law enforcement prior to that?
Yes.
Where did you work?
Montgomery County Police in Montgomery County, Maryland.
How long did you work there?
4 years.
Were you working at the Aurora Police Department on July 20th of 2012?
Yes.
What did your duties consist of at that time?
I was working patrol, so I was working graveyards. Patrol, graveyards meaning the hours I worked, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., responding to calls, dispatch.
Did you hear a call for officers to respond to the Century 16 Theater on July 20th?
Yes.
How did the call come out?
I don't remember exactly. I think I just remember hearing shooting.
Do you recall what time it was?
I do not.
Was it after midnight?
Yes.
Do you recall where you were at the time that you heard the call for officers to respond to the theater?
Yes, I was on another call with officers dealing with some type of civil dispute in the area of Central High School. I think it's like 11th and Peoria in Aurora.
Did you respond from that location to the theater?
Yes.
Was the call for specific people to respond, or was it a general request for cars to respond?
It was for everybody.
How long did it take you to get to the theater?
Maybe a minute or so, I'd guess.
When you got to the theater, what did you observe?
Chaos.
And we'll talk outside first. So when you arrive outside first, let's back up a minute. How did you approach the theater? Do you recall from what direction you were coming?
I came from Alameda, so I was coming from Denver, so I was heading eastbound Alameda, and then I took a right into where the theater parking lot is. Can't tell you specifically what street it is, but came eastbound Alameda and then took a right into where the theater is.
In the parking lot, what did you see?
Just chaos, people running and running.
Did you see other police officers there at that time?
Yes, but I can't tell you specifically who was where. It was just kind of surreal.
Do you know where you parked in relation to the theater?
Yes, I would have been on the south. If I'm using Alameda, I'd probably say the southwest side of the theater. I was in the front, but south of it to the west of it.
But on the front side of the theater?
Yes.
Would a map help you to illustrate where you were?
Sure.
And let's see. We have a variety of things around, Your Honor. May I approach with two of these, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as People's Exhibit 4741. Does that one help illustrate where you were? Is the theater down here, or is this one too large?
No, that's good. Do you want me to point?
If you could, please.
Oh, wait, hold on. Table.
Make sure you speak into the microphone.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get
oriented.
So Alameda's down here.
Alameda would be
up there.
And this is 225, and then Sable is marked right there.
I might flip it. Give me a second.
Just a second. Let me give you a different one. Will work better. And this is People's Exhibit 4740. If this is the front of the theater, right here.
Yeah, so I was somewhere in here.
So somewhere to kind of the north and west of the theater?
Sorry, yes, north. Sorry.
Thank you. When you parked there, what did you do first?
Right when I had parked, somebody came across the radio saying that make sure you had your gas mask. So I went to my trunk to find my gas mask.
Did you have it with you?
I did, luckily.
And were you able to get it out?
Yes. And there I was accompanied by another officer too. He happened to be running up at the exact same time and threw some stuff in my trunk that he just couldn't carry.
What kinds of things did he throw in your trunk?
I don't remember. I just remember he was grabbing his gear, and I have no idea.
Did you go towards the theater with your gas mask?
I did.
Do you recall how you entered the theater complex?
I went through the front door. Prior to getting to the front door, I know I got stopped by some victims. I believe, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 women, but they were just saying, she's been shot, and, pretty much helped me. And I kind of did like a quick assessment to see, okay, is anything falling out or whatever. And, I don't know where she was injured at, but, looking her from the front, there was nothing necessarily protruding or whatever. And I'm like, can you make it to the fire truck? And she's like, yeah. And I remember seeing a fire truck as I was running up. And so I pointed in the direction of the fire truck, and I know, hopefully I sent him in the right direction. And then I went to the front door of the theater.
Did you go into the lobby?
I did.
When you entered the lobby, what did you see or what did you experience?
Before I even made it into, I think as soon as I opened the front door, that's when I got struck by the gas. I had my mask on, apparently not tight enough, because I immediately sort of like kind of have that coughing, can't breathe feeling, and then I had to pretty much tell myself to buck up and readjust and put it on properly, and then I actually went full into the theater.
When you entered the lobby, did you see other police officers in the lobby?
I did see, just straight ahead, there was a female in front of me that was on a corner, posted up.
Did you go into Theater 9?
I did.
How did that occur that you ended up going into Theater 9?
Well, when I first went in, like, I saw a female on the outside of some theater, and then I was with her, and then I heard somebody yell to my right of me saying, hey, you come with us, you have a mask on. So I was assuming obviously they needed me to go into the theater because I had a mask on. So went into Theater 9, went in on the right side when I came in.
Were you familiar with this theater complex?
Not at all.
So you had not been to Theater 9 before?
No.
When you went into Theater 9, did you go in then with another police officer?
Yes.
And do you know who you went in with?
I believe Officer Baker was behind me, and then another officer, I think Officer Rowland was the one that told me to go with him, possibly.
When you first entered the theater, what was it like?
Surreal. When I first went in, there was a guy at the very end of because the seats were to my left, so I kind of went, like I said, I went down the right side, and there was a guy laying there on the floor. All I remember was in a green shirt, and I went directly to him. I just remember officers are in there everywhere, but I just saw him, so I went to him to see if he was okay. And I think he had said he'd been shot in the back, so I was kind of dealing with him. And then that's at some point I turned around. I don't know whether it's because somebody said something, but that's when they started carrying people down from the seats behind me.
When you first entered the theater, did you know whether or not a suspect had been arrested?
No.
So what were you expecting when you went into the theater?
A gun battle.
Did you have your gun drawn when you went into the theater?
Yes.
Now, you said when you went in, after you'd seen this person in a green shirt, that they were trying to get people down from the stadium seating?
Yes.
How was that occurring? Did you see it? Well, first of all, did you see a number of people in the stadium seating?
I kind of just tunnel visioned a little bit. I'm sure there was more people in there than I saw. The only people noticeably that I noticed in the theater is when I turned around, there was a guy apparently deceased. He was folded over, so he's the only person I really noticed. And then they were carrying a woman down, which later I found out and helped out. That was Ashley.
Ashley Mosier?
Yeah.
The person that you saw that to you appeared deceased, where was that person?
So, like most theaters are kind of split up. There's, the top part, and then there's a railing and a little bit of a space, and then the bottom part. So he was directly behind that railing, kind of folded over. So the first row, so it was like the first row of seats, and then there's the railing. So, and he was folded over there.
Now, you said you had tunnel vision when you were in the theater. Do you know why that was?
It was just surreal. It was supposed to be my last night of working graveyards, and I just didn't expect that to be my last night and last call. So it was just the whole arriving, people running, smoke, gas, it was just surreal.
You were talking about the fact that you helped with someone named Ashley Mosier.
Yes.
Or you later learned.
Yes.
Where was this person in the theater?
Again, I don't know specifically where she was seating, because by the time that I started assisting, I don't know how far they'd already brought her down, but pretty much when they got down to that first row again, I guess where that guy was also deceased, that's kind of when I turned around and helped carry her from there and then out the theater.
What did you observe about her injuries?
She'd been shot. I didn't really necessarily know exactly where until we got in the car.
Where did you take her?
Aurora South.
No, I'm taking her from the theater. That was not a very good question. From where you first encountered her at about the beginning of the stadium seating in the theater, where did you...
Directly out the exit. Like, pretty much down, and then I guess there was an exit directly in front on the same side that we were on.
Did it take more than one person to...
Yeah, there was a few of us carrying her.
Once you got her outside, what did you do with her?
my partner, Officer Grizzle, rolled up in his car, and then we put her in the car, and then I got in the back with her, and we took her to Aurora South.
Did anyone else get in the car as well?
Yes, her boyfriend.
And did you ever learn who that person was?
Yes, Jameson.
What was his demeanor like?
Frantic. Screaming, because at first we were just trying to, sorry.
Was he screaming about Veronica?
Yes, I didn't know her name at the time, but is that Ash? I think that's Ashley's daughter, so yes.
He was screaming about a child?
Yes.
And you said he was frantic?
Yes, because we weren't even going to have him get in the car with us, but he was pretty adamant just to go with us. He's like, screaming,
that he wanted to get in. So when you were in the car, you said you got into the back seat, and you need to answer out loud for the court reporter.
Sorry.
Was that a yes?
Oh, yes.
When you were in the back seat, what were you doing?
Just applying pressure to her wound. It was in her chest.
Was she conscious?
She was. I just was asking her everything and anything to keep her talking while we drove, and she was, for the most part. I mean, I can't even. I just remember. I think that's when I finally got her name. Told me her name. Told me about her daughter. I think I asked her age. We might have even talked about school. I don't know. I just was saying everything I could just to keep her talking. It wasn't until we got off the highway and we hit Mississippi to turn on Potomac, and she stopped. Sorry. I'm coming. Hold on. I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's okay. Here's some cleaning stuff for you.
By the time we pulled into the hospital, she stopped talking and she lost consciousness. And I really thought she just died there in front of me. So by the time we got there, like the emergency room, they came out and I was like, she stopped talking, she stopped breathing, and then they took her in. I wanted to go back with Officer Grizzle to go help with more people, but I can't remember who. Somebody told me I had to stay at the hospital and deal with the victims as they arrived because I was the first officer there.
While you were at the hospital, and this was at Aurora South?
Yes.
Did you see other people who appeared to be victims of gunshot wounds arriving at the hospital?
Yeah, they came in. Just kept coming in.
Did you see how they were arriving?
I didn't, because I was already inside, so I don't know how people were arriving.
While you were in the hospital, did you talk to some of the people that were arriving?
I did. I talked to Petra for a little. I'm sorry.
Is that someone that you later learned was Petra Anderson?
Yeah, I believe she told me her name there. We talked. We were able to talk.
And did you do something for her to assist her?
I did. I'm pretty sure I was assigned to, like I said, every victim that came in. So, but yeah, so I was trying to get her name and information. So I got her name and information so somebody I can contact for her. And I know I called her mom. And by the time, I was dealing with other patients, and I know I had gone out in the lobby at some other point, and her mom had been out there, I don't know how long, and she's like, yeah, I'm waiting, and I'm like, how long have you been sitting out here? And I'm like, I don't think they knew you got here. And so I went back inside to find, I don't know if it was Petra's nurse or whomever, and they're like, yeah, we couldn't find out where her mom is or anything like that. We couldn't contact mom because we couldn't get the information. So no sooner I got it from Petra, she totally forgot, couldn't tell them anything. And she just, for that fraction of a moment, she was able to remember for me to be able to call her mom. So, kind of a cool story.
Do you Do you recall seeing other people arrive with? Do you recall any of the other specific injuries?
Yeah, so I spoke to, I think I called him KG in my report, but I think it's Casey. He had an injury to his leg. I think he said the first thing he had asked was like, he was very calm and he just was like, hey, can someone just give me some ibuprofen? So I spoke to him for a little while. There's another guy that came in, I don't know, I didn't get his name, because he was in a lot of pain and there was a lot of screaming. I know I spoke to a young girl, I believe she's in my report. Her name is Caitlin. I think she was there with another friend named Caitlin. I spoke to them. I know I spoke to a couple other victims, as I was helping. I think it's the married couple when I was helping CSI. I know I went and checked on Stefan. I kept going back and checking on Ashley. Pretty much anybody that came to the hospital.
Now, you said you also assisted the CSIs and those are crime scene investigators?
Yes.
And what did you do for them?
I can't remember specifically. I know I just helped whatever she needed to do, the officer. I don't know if I was helping holding stuff, but I pretty much went around with her. She collected evidence.
At some point, did you go back to the theater?
Yeah.
Do you recall what time that was?
I don't.
Were you at the hospital all night?
Yeah. I was at the hospital. Lucky enough, since I worked graveyards, I actually got off technically on time. So I think I probably got back to the theater maybe by like 7:30 a.m. Somewhere in that time, maybe 7:30 or something.
Now, had you driven a police car to the theater?
I did.
And you had not taken it to the hospital, is that
No.
right? Did you find your car at the theater?
I did. It had been. I had to find it. It wasn't where I left it.
What kind of condition was it in?
It was bloody when I found it. I remember just being blood on my computer, blood on my water bottle, and there was blood in the back seat.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions for you.
Ms. Brady, any questions? It looks like the jury has a question for you. Sorry, do you mind?
No.
All right, thank you. Would counsel please approach? Are appropriate, and so I am going to ask these questions of you now, okay?
Okay.
The first question is, when did you put your mask on? At what point?
As soon as I arrived and once I heard, as I rolled up, that's when I heard whoever come across the radio to make sure, put on your gas mask. So I got out the car and I put my gas mask on.
The next question is, you said that the gas hit you at the door. Is that the entrance of the lobby or the theater?
The entrance of, and again, I don't know if you have pictures of the inside of the, all I know is when I opened, like coming from outside, I opened the door, that's where I felt gas. Now, whether there's also, again, I can't remember, whether I can't know if you open that door, then you're in a little cubicle and open another door, but when I opened the front door of the theater, I could smell gas from there.
Ms. Pearson, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yes.
Now, you said that you smelled gas when you walked in the front door of the theater. Did you notice any difference in the concentration of the gas smell when you went into Theater 9?
I would say no, because once I got hit from literally opening the front doors from outside to go into the, theater itself, that's when I tightened down my gas mask, so I should not have been affected. So once from that point on, I was fine for the rest of the time in the theater. When I officially went in the lobby and when I was actually in Theater 9. Thank you.
Any follow-up questions, Ms. Brady? All right. Thank you. May this witness be released from our subpoena? Any objection?
No.
All right. Would counsel please approach? Is there anybody who needs to leave at 5 or before 5:15? Raise your hand. Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Mr. Rockler, call your next witness, please.
Bernd Hofler, Your Honor.
You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Okay, please be seated. Please tell us your full name and spell your first and last names.
My full name is Ben Ray Hofler. First name is spelled B-E-R-N-D. Last name is Hofler, H-O-E-F-L-E-R.
You may proceed, Mr. Brockler.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, would you please tell us what you do for a living?
I am a lieutenant with the Aurora Fire Department.
How long have you been with the Aurora Fire Department?
Since 2003. I'm going on my 13th year.
Did you do any firefighter work prior to 2003?
I began my career with Southwest Adams County as a reserve and a short time paid there.
How many years did you do that before you went to Aurora?
About 2 years.
Any other EMT type work before Adams County?
No, sir.
All right, now you say you're a lieutenant. How is that job different than, let's say, we had Mr. Herrera up here earlier?
We all have specific assignments, kind of like a football team. When we show up on scene, we all have goals of what we want to attain, and the lieutenant will kind of be like the quarterback where he calls the play, and the other guys run it most of the time.
Do you work out of a specific station in Aurora?
Yes, I work out of Station 2.
Is that the same station we heard that Mr. Herrera had been out of?
Yes, sir.
Do you get called out when he gets called out?
Not all the time, only on specific calls.
I want to take you back to July the 20th, 2012. Did you get called out from Station 2 on that morning?
Yes, sir.
Why?
We were called out on a gunshot at the theater. At the time, we thought maybe 3-4 people shot.
Now, you said you don't get called out at the same time as some of the other fellas in the station. What were the circumstances under which you got dispatched to this particular scene?
Depending on the hazard casualty and what the first officers ask for, we'll start escalating the call as we see a need for resources. And so most times, and especially during that time of the theater shooting, when a single shooting came in, we sent a engine, a truck, and a battalion chief on one person shot, and that's your first response.
How is your position related to the battalion chief?
The battalion chief oversees the battalion of so many stations. Each chief in Aurora, Colorado, has 5 stations.
Now, what made this particular call out unique in your mind?
The way it escalated. Shooting in North Aurora is not out of the norm. We get quite a few of those. I've been on probably over 100 in my career up there. And so when we were going and we heard 3-4 people shot, it was not out of the norm until we started hearing the panic on the police radio.
Describe that.
You could tell the cops had been there a little while by the time we were en route. The first engines were dispatched. It takes them a little while to get out of the barn, get on scene, and then to request resources and ask for us to come. So we're probably 5-6 minutes in when we get called, and my computer gives us updates faster than they can speak it out. And I could see how many patients and how many people were calling, so I switched to the police channel. And while they're waiting that duration for more crews, you could hear a panic.
Had you heard that before?
No.
What did it do to you in terms of your response to go out to the scene?
It let me know that we were going to something different.
And so what'd you do?
I turned to my crew and I said, hey guys, we got something different here. We got something out of the norm. Be ready for anything.
And
when we got on scene, we probably weren't ready enough for that.
What kind of vehicle did you go in?
We're in a ladder truck, a 100-foot ladder truck.
Are you in the same kind of, I'm going to say, are an engine and truck different? Forgive me, I don't.
Yes, sir. Essentially, the engine carries water to the scene. The ladder truck carries tools. So, like you asked, when will we go together? If we have an extra patient, they will go take care of the patient. We will cut the patient out. If we go on a shooting, they will go for patient care, we will go for extirpation of the patient if they need special tools.
Was there a specific assignment you thought you would have then at this kind of panicked call out?
I thought when we first were dispatched, we just thought we had extra patients, third, fourth, fifth patient, until I could hear the officers on the radio calling for help in the rear.
Now, because you're a lieutenant, does that mean that you don't have experience actually dealing with the medical treatment and triage of gunshot wounds or patients?
No, sir. We're all trained at least at an EMT level, and most of our crews are paramedics.
All right. How long does it take you to get on scene?
We're on scene to the entrance of the theater in about 10 minutes.
Now, is that the front entrance of the theater?
That's the entrance off Sable on the east side.
Okay, with the court permission, I'd like to publish 4740. Is it 41? Thank you.
I think it is. It may be published, whichever one you want.
Okay. We'll just run through them. Go ahead and take some water. Thank you. All right. Does this help you describe for the jury what it is you did on scene, at least before you went into the theater?
It's a little bit of different picture might be better for us.
You knew that was coming. 40. How about 4740? How about that one?
That helps.
Okay, great. Can you do us a favor? Would you stand up with the stick here?
And a microphone back
here. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Sir. Okay. And I'll need to turn it on.
Oh, I didn't hear you. Try to. Oh, okay. Okay, you're good. And would you talk us through when your truck arrived, where it went, and what you started doing?
So we come down Sable from 6th Avenue, and we take this entrance up here. As we pull up, we're told to stage. Immediately upon pulling up on scene and saying staging, what staging means is they're getting ready to allocate you for resources where they're going to send you what they're going to do. Command's got so many calls and he's so inundated at that time he can't really keep up. But as we pull into the scene, we're getting blocked in by police cars. We can't make entrance. We're literally up over here because we're blocked out by police cars. So I self-assigned us. I said, we're going to the rear of the theater. I called command, let them know, and we started going over those medians. There was a bigger median up here. We jumped that. We went over that, maybe as this one, and we ended up in the rear of the theater right next to the suspect's car.
So you drove the big old fire truck ladder thing up over those things?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you were there, did you see any other fire emergency vehicles or just police cars?
No, I could see Engine 8 and Tower 8 in the front.
Why did you choose to go to the back?
Because I could hear the cops calling for rescue in the rear.
All right, so you get to the back, and by the way, do you need to keep standing to talk us through what you did? And I'm asking, because if you say yes, then you will stand. If you say no, I will take this off the screen and we can keep talking.
Well, if we want to talk about like the ambulances or anything and the lack thereof,
let's do that. Okay, tell us about the scene back here. How many other emergency medical support vehicles are behind the theater at the time you get there?
None. So as we're coming up and we're taking these medians, it takes us probably a good 2 minutes to get 75 yards. You got people running out, you got cars getting out, and you got everyone trying to get in. So it's a very slow process to get back there without running anyone over and trying to get to the rear of the theater where they need our help.
Now, do you have lights on when you're doing
Yes,
this?
sir.
Is there an audible siren going?
Yes, sir, but we're probably not blasting it at that time.
When you say there's people everywhere, are these uniformed first responder types or civilians?
Mostly civilians.
And what are they doing?
Running.
Okay, keep going.
So then just knowing that this is actually a rather large field, that's what it took us to get through here. I didn't think I'd be able to bring any ambulances back through there. And knowing how long that field was to move people that gravely wounded over a field is what led us to transporting cop cars.
Now, was that a decision that you helped make, was to say, we're just going with police cars because that's the only thing that's going to work?
Yes, sir. The way that decision was made, one of the females who passed was being carried out by the officers and handed off to a couple fire guys, and we had nowhere to put her. And the cop, out of frustration, said, Forget it. I'll throw her in the cop car. I looked at the lead detective back there, or whatever his rank is. I don't know. The lead officer. And I asked him, I said, will you guys do that for us? Will you transport in cop cars? And he said, absolutely. And then they lined up and we started triaging the 9 down plus 2 we had coming out of the theater.
Okay, let's talk about that. And go ahead and take your seat then.
Yes, sir.
You can go back to the other microphone. Thanks, Emily. All right, now you had mentioned some numbers there about victims, and we talked about triage, and I want you to make us a little bit smarter on how that process works. Tell us how the triage system works when you come up to a mass casualty situation like this.
So triage is set up to save the most savable lives, okay, and the most gravely injured. If you are pulseless and not breathing, you are tagged as black. It's just a color reference, nothing else. And that means we'll adjust your airway, we'll see if we get you breathing. If not, you're tagged black, we move on to the next. If you're tagged red, you've got a pulse, a breath rate, BP between a certain area, or you've got injuries that we think are threatening to your life. Yellow's decent injury, serious injury, but you're not going to die. And green is the walking wounded. So once we triage, we will eliminate the black, because you can't spend time on them when you have that many people. You will prioritize the red because they're the ones in need of the hospital the most, and then move down towards the yellow and the green.
Now, outside this, behind what you came to know as Theater Number 9, tell me about that triage assessment, who you came across.
Well, what we came across was blood and bodies everywhere. It was like a horror film. You had people in theatrics, people in costumes running around, not really sure who shot what, and then you had bodies down. Everyone who was shot in the back was tagged red with life-threatening injuries. And we had everything from a lady shot to the neck with her guts eviscerated, to a young woman with her hand blown off, shot in other places, and people laid out, shot repeatedly next to her.
Now, a couple things before we move from that scene. Just for the record, you use the term eviscerated. What does that mean?
It meant her insides, her bowels were hanging out of her skin.
Okay, and did you particularly treat or direct her treatment with her?
2 of the firefighters on the scene grabbed her and assisted putting her in a police car. And by this time, Engine 5 showing up and they're helping out, so I get 4 more guys.
Now, as a lieutenant on a scene, are you typically a hands-on kind of person from the fire department?
Depends on the call and the need of the call. In this situation, it was all hands on deck. We had way too many victims to sit back and watch guys work. I had to get in with the guys. And
how long were you behind the theater before you went inside the theater?
I couldn't give you an honest answer. I would estimate about 5 minutes.
And during those 5 minutes, were you at all hands-on with patients or more assessing the scene?
Went through and did a quick triage and account of the patients. I attempted to call command one time and request that we could get an ambulance. This was before I'd made the decision to go in the cop car. And then I was helping the guy. Once we made the decision to go into the police car, I was helping the firefighters load the victims.
You remember how many red or black you had behind the theater before you go inside?
In the exterior, there were 9 red and 2 more essentially black being brought out.
Okay. How does the decision get made for you to go inside the theater? Why do you do that?
Because we still need to triage and get our medical guys in there and check for any survivors.
Now, at this time, do you have any awareness at all what the situation with the shooter is?
No idea what the situation with the shooter is, and how many there are, who there is. None.
Don't know if they've got him in custody or why they're still around?
None.
So what did you do to protect yourself as you went into the theater?
We have a saying in the fire service, we'll risk a lot to save a lot. We had a lot of lives to save that night, so there was no protecting ourselves.
Who did you go in with?
I went in with paramedic Holsworth. And we had one of the new guys stage at the door with a backboard in case we found someone.
Did you go in through that back door that leads right into 9?
Yes, sir. We went up through the alleyway, and I remember stepping over weapons, piles of ammunition, and blood everywhere.
When you got inside Theater Number 9, were there other first responders, paramedics already there?
To my knowledge, cops with flashlights, still searching with their guns drawn, looking for shooters, anyone hiding anyone like that. The theater was full of what I believe was tear gas.
Why do you say that?
Because the way our eyes burned and our noses started to run, and I've been around tear gas before, so I had a feeling that's what it was.
Did you leave then because of the tear gas?
No, we had to look for survivors.
Tell us what you found.
We came up to the first stairs. You can all see the way the theater's laid out. And if you look, essentially you had 10 bodies laid out. Some of them trampled, some of them missing parts of their head, mass injuries. And, you know, in the size of that theater, you had body up till 10. And so we started at the first one in the bottom right corner and worked our way up from there.
Now, as you're working your way up the theater to check on potential survivors, are you taking time to document where every body is located and all that?
No, sir. What we're in there, we're looking for anyone who's got survivable injuries, anyone breathing. We'll come up, we'll check for a pulse, and then we'll adjust an airway. Except for in this situation with the amount of injuries, there were a lot of airways that didn't need to be adjusted because there was injuries incompatible with life.
What does that mean?
It essentially means you have brain matter outside, you have half your head missing. There's no way you can survive a wound like that.
Were there any people that you came across that in a different setting you would have attempted to save them or revive them?
Yes, sir.
Tell us about that.
I believe it was the third victim I came to. He always sticks out in my mind because it was so different. He wasn't obviously dead in there. He was still very warm, very limber. And at this point, me and paramedic Holsworth had split up. He was going left and I was going right, so we could do it quicker and try and find anyone. And when I came to him, I checked him, and the way his body presented, I wanted to save him. I wanted to work him. And did an airway adjustment. He didn't start breathing, but he was still so warm that I called paramedic Holsworth over. I said, "Donnie, come over. Let's double check this." And Donnie double checked it, and we had to tag him black because the amount of victims you have, you can't commit resources to the one guy who's passed. So we had to count him black and then move on to the rest.
Listening to you talk about it, I can hear something in your voice. Are you thinking back on this and affected by it?
I can close my eyes and see the picture of the theater.
The objection is untimely because he gave the answer before the objection. But you should move on, please, Mr. Brockway.
Yes, thank you.
The request is denied.
Yeah, here's what I would normally do if this model had been much larger than it is I would have you come down and point out where you went. But it sounds like a lot of this wasn't documented at the time. It wouldn't be specific. You would be guesstimating on some of the rows. Is that fair?
Some of the rows I'd be guesstimating, but I can tell you exactly where I went.
Your Honor, could we do that? And that would be the end of this part of the testimony. With the court's permission, if I could have him grab the microphone and come down. You're big. Could you pick it up? Thank you. Here, and I hope this is the right angle for this. More. Thank you. Good. Okay. Go ahead, sir. And then we're going to turn it to these folks, and we'll do the same thing.
Okay. So essentially, we parked our vehicle right here, and after we triaged the 9 people laid out and the 2 that had come out, we entered through this entrance over here, stepping over ammunition, weapons, and blood. We entered, and we came to the first victim right about here. And like I said, it was dark. It was nasty. There's tear gas. And I kneeled down to adjust the first victim's head like we do for any triage, and my paramedic put his hand on me and said, "It's, injuries incompatible with life. We need to move on." So I looked at him. I said, "Okay, I'll go right. You go left." I had a victim smashed down up here. Looked like they had been trampled. The third victim I spoke about was over in this area. That's the one I called Donnie back over as he was working victims up over in here. He had come back and checked with me. We decided to tag him black. I proceeded up. I had a victim in one of these middle rows, and most of his head had been removed, so I didn't get very good close. I didn't adjust his airway. And I came up for one more victim, and we had one more female up in here victim. As I met Donnie, how many you got, Donnie? I got 5. I got 5. We got 10. Give me one more count. Double check. I'll meet you at the bottom.
Okay. And forgive me for asking you to do it one more time, sir, but whatever.
So we came in through the entrance, stepping over the weapons and all the stuff I described. We came up to the first victim up over here. I went to adjust his airway. We didn't do it. He had injuries incompatible with life. At this point, Donnie and I split up. Donnie went up the left side to check for survivors. I went to the right. I had a victim smashed down in here from being trampled after shot with obvious injuries incompatible with life. We did adjust his airway with no success. Came to the third victim. That was the victim that we talked about working in any other situation we would have, but we can't. Mass casualty. Donnie went back left, went up, and I went up on the right side, finding another victim missing half the head in here. Another victim up here, and then we met at the female at the top. We gave each other a count, went back down.
Before I have you sit back down, sir, did you guys find anyone to save?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you for doing it. Thank you. Sir, when you were done clearing theater number 9, did you leave the theater complex again?
Yes, sir. Came back out to the rear of the theater where my apparatus was parked.
Did you do anything else of a life-saving nature from behind that theater?
At that time, I was informed that they thought the suspect's vehicle was full of explosives, and so they wanted to evacuate. Once again, we made sure we had everyone evacuated from that area before we left, and then we retreated our truck out of that area, and we put up about a 300-foot safe distance.
Now, I don't want to go into the details of what you heard after that, but were you then dispatched to what you believe to be the shooter's apartment after that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and my guess is, for reasons we'll get into later, you did not make entry into that?
No, sir.
Okay. Can I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Higgs, do you have any questions?
Oh, no, thank you.
Okay. And the jury may have a question for you, if you would give us a moment. Would counsel please approach? Sir, the jury has submitted a question, and based on the rules of evidence and other applicable rules of law, I have concluded that it's appropriate, and so I'm going to ask it. The question is, for the third victim that you tagged black, you said that you wanted to work him, but didn't. Does that mean that he was technically dead, but you wanted to try and revive him?
Yes, sir. That's exactly what it means.
Any follow-up based on that question from the jury, Mr. Brockler?
No, Your Honor.
Any follow-up from you, Ms. Higgs?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be released from his subpoena?
May.
Any objection?
No.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the jury, it's about 5:15, and so we're going to adjourn for the day. I want to remind you that it is important, very important, in fact, extremely important, that you follow each and every advisement that I've given you. I am planning on reminding you about them tomorrow, right before the long break for the weekend. I say long break because we're not going to have session on Friday. But I know you know them by heart. I know that I've given them to you multiple times. I just want to remind you that they are extremely important. And so please follow each and every one of them. I want to call your attention to one particular one. As you know, there are times when the attorneys and I have to discuss administrative matters or legal matters, and in fact, you've had to wait for us a couple of times, and you've been very patient. We're having those discussions a lot of times in open court, and there may be media coverage of that, and so you need to be very careful about avoiding all media reports of the case, because if there's a report about something that the attorneys and I have talked about outside your presence, then you need to be very careful about making sure that you don't have access to that information. Does that make sense to everyone? All right, and everyone's nodding their head yes. So be particularly vigilant when it comes to the internet, when it comes to the radio, when it comes to the TV, the newspaper, all mediums. Just be for all media. Be very, very vigilant about avoiding any stories about the case. Okay. All the other advisements are equally important. I just wanted to give you a further explanation of that one. All right. Enjoy the evening, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 8:15. Thank you, folks. He has exited the courtroom. Everyone may be seated. With one of the witnesses and the witness's attorneys after the witness testified, and so I'm going to bring that person in at this time. Sir, you can come up to the podium, yes. Tell me your name, please.
Jason Sickles.
How do you spell your last name?
S as in Sam, your first name Jason, J-A-S-O-N, last name S-I-C-K-L-E-S. It's S as in Sam, I-C-K-L-E-S. Sorry.
S-I-C-K-L-E-S.
Yes.
And are you with, what organization are you with?
Yahoo News.
Yahoo News? Okay. All right, it's my understanding, sir, that you attempted to interview a witness after he testified this afternoon here in the hallway. There's an order that is in place that I issued that prevents any interviews from taking place in the hallway. There is a specific area that's designated for that. And my understanding is that one of the members of the sheriff, one of the deputies of the sheriff's department, stopped the interview and asked you to conduct it pursuant to my order. Is that correct?
Not entirely. Can I explain?
Sure.
It wasn't in the hallway. It was in the lobby, and I attempted to interview a gentleman who I thought was his attorney. It was in the foyer, the very first floor, near the security. I thought that they were exiting, so I yelled. It was Mr. Weaver. He had just finished up, and I yelled and asked if the man was his attorney. In previous days, I had been introduced to the man, and he was with him in the court here today, and I thought that, I introduced and said, "Are you Mr. Weaver's attorney?" And I said, "His name Tony." He said, "No, my name's actually Tim. It's Tim Smith." And that's when the sheriff's deputy tapped me and said, "Hey, you can't do interviews in here." I said, "Yeah, so you're right." I said, "We need to go outside." And we went out the doors and down the sidewalk. As we were going down the sidewalk, I asked the question. I don't know if you want me to reveal the question.
No, you don't need to reveal the question.
And then the family, who I've known previously, they continued to talk to me, but I did not talk to them. And the sheriff's deputies continued to follow me. I knew we needed to get to the parking lot at that point, and I took notes. And they kept talking to me. And I apologize that I attempted to try to talk to the attorney. And I'm very sorry for that.
I accept your apology. I just want to make sure that my orders are followed. I have issued a lot of orders, and I have granted the media as much access as I possibly can in terms of the trial and in terms of information during the trial. This is a public proceeding, but there are rules that have to be followed.
Yes, sir.
And so I want to make sure those rules are followed. I'm not going to take any action at this point. I accept your apology. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of all the orders and that you understand that all the orders must be followed.
Yes, sir.
If there is another incident, it's not going to go this nicely, and there are going to be harsher consequences. Do you understand?
Completely.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, is there anything on behalf of the people at this time?
No, no, a personal matter.
Yeah. Anything else on behalf of the people, Mr. Brockler?
No, sir, thank you.
Anything on behalf of the defense, Ms. Spengler or Mr. King?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you folks tomorrow morning. Oh, before you leave, on that issue that came up earlier today in terms of the pregnancy, when do you folks want to address that? We need to address that before Thursday afternoon? Do you want to do it Thursday afternoon?
Yes, Your Honor, we can address that.
Tomorrow afternoon. Okay, we'll add it to the list tomorrow afternoon. Thank you. The court will be in recess.
Hey, Brian.